Back when Lin was still the immortal lord he used to be, he throws up a martial stance and hits with the kind of force that does not belong in a human body. He is already fighting at a level where survival comes down to luck, and even then the clash tears everything apart around him. Then the impossible happens, and his spirit crosses into another world, finds a freshly dead body, and drops into it. That is how the mighty old cultivator ends up waking as Lin, a neglected, overweight kid in a body that has none of his former status and all of his problems. Once he starts taking stock of this new life, the bad news stacks up fast. His parents died in a car accident, his grandmother now has Alzheimer's in the hospital, and that empty family situation leaves him with nothing protecting him except his own will. That is why the arranged marriage hits like a bad joke with paperwork attached. Lin's grandmother announces a match she made before the illness took hold, and he and Hui, his arranged fiancé and classmate, rejects him outright by mocking his weight like that alone settles the matter. Lin does not fold under it. Something in him wakes up hard, and when he answers, the point is not romance. It is control. He is done letting other people decide what his life is for. Back at the formal dinner, his presence starts changing the room before anybody even says much. He sits down, forces himself to eat, and keeps the old hunger in check because he knows rebuilding this body matters more than pretending he still has the luxury of being fussy. That growth buys him a new condition, and he takes it. Purple-haired family staff or an attendant laughs it off. But the deal is simple enough. He can go to school as long as his marks hold up, which means education is now part of his path instead of a background detail. On the road in, the driver announces they have arrived, and Lin steps into the city like a guy already measuring the board. He looks at the architecture, then at the people around him, and realizes this reverse world has its own rules for status, beauty, and who gets looked at twice. From a rooftop, Lin finally turns the whole situation into strategy. He suspects Venerable Demon may have also crossed over here, so he knows he cannot afford to drift around this world being underestimated. He has to get stronger before she shows up and turns his second life into a repeat performance. At school, the social mess starts immediately. Lin gets dragged into gossip about whether he confessed to He Yanhui, and the dismissive reaction around him makes it clear that his name is already becoming public in the worst possible way. Then Han Xingyi, a competitive rival who likes to test people through games, corners him and puts the pressure right on his shoulder. Lin answers honestly that he is not good at games, and instead of scaring her off, that bluntness hooks her harder because she likes that he does not bluff. That little exchange blows up into school-wide attention fast enough to make the building itself feel implicated. By the time they end up alone in an empty classroom, Lin has turned a potential humiliation into a private contest, and Han Xingyi is now part of the crowd around him, whether he wanted that or not. In the classroom now, Lin is stuck in the kind of private standoff that can turn into public gossip in one bad breath. The whole point is simple. One casual moment between a boy and a girl is already enough to start a rumor machine in a school like this, and Lin is about to find out that attention here spreads faster than dignity. Then the scene slides into a game layer, and the stakes change from embarrassment to identity. What looks like a flashy fairy and immortal-themed action game is really a way of exposing who is strong, who is bluffing, and who gets to sit on top when everyone starts keeping score. Lin's profile comes up as Baby Momo, which is a humiliating little nickname with teeth because it tells everyone he is being judged before he even acts. That matters because this world does not just watch people, it labels them. And once the label sticks, the crowd starts deciding what he deserves. Out in the game world, Song Yunshi, a competitive player, and Cat Slayer drag Lin into a fight that is really about status. Cat Slayer talks big, charges first, and forces everyone to see whether Lin is just a joke on a monitor or someone with enough instinct to survive pressure when it gets real. The white-haired swordsman Lin refuses to panic and tells the other side to stay back, which shows the first crack of his old battle sense coming through. That is the key turn here. He stops acting like prey and starts moving like someone who remembers how to control a battlefield, even if the body he has now is still catching up. Cat Slayer comes back swinging with the confidence of someone who thinks the other side is already broken, but the calm response from Lin and the opponent undercut that swagger fast. This is where the match stops being theater and turns into a test of whether raw aggression can beat someone who sees the fight one step ahead. Back at the gaming station, the reaction tells the real story. The people watching are shocked because Baby Momo is not supposed to move like a professional. That kind of surprise matters more than the flashy effects, because Lin is no longer just surviving the school hierarchy. He is cracking the little boxes they tried to trap him in. Outside in the park now, Zhao Yutang, a strong-willed student who never quits once she locks on, takes over the chase. She decides he cannot escape, and that certainty turns the pursuit into a hunt, with Lin's ability to keep running becoming the only thing standing between him and getting dragged back into someone else's plans. Lin answers that pressure by forcing out more power than his body should safely handle, because he is done letting stronger people set the pace for him. The cost is obvious even before the blow lands. Every time he burns through that hidden soul power, he proves he is dangerous, but he also risks tearing open the limits of his new life. While the chase keeps escalating, other voices crackle in with bad news and fresh panic, which means this fight is only one branch of a much bigger mess. Cat Slayer is still wrecking people somewhere nearby, and the story makes it clear that Lin is being pulled into a wider struggle, whether he wants the spotlight or not. Zhao Yutang pushes upward into the next exchange, and the white-haired warrior surges through the forest to meet the threat head-on. The hidden identity shift matters here, because the game layer is no longer just a metaphor. It is revealing how each fighter acts under pressure and who is really carrying the power. The fight is already at its ugly end. Lin's side has the advantage now, because the opponent tries to close the gap and gets punished for thinking distance would save him. Lin keeps pressure on him until the masked warrior is knocked backward, and the loser's little speech about fighting from far away turns into a joke nobody laughs at. Somewhere else, the real fallout starts landing. A person at a computer gets the bad news that Thunderbolt and Pin Tian have both been killed by Cat Slayer, which tells everyone this mess is bigger than one duel and nastier than anyone wanted to admit. The victors can swing blades all they want, but the body count is already moving the social war forward. The humiliation spreads fast, and now the women who lost have to swallow it in public. They talk about being laughed at, then immediately switch to damage control by telling someone to call the girl on the opposing team and set up a meeting, because if they can't win cleanly, they at least want to control the next conversation. Meanwhile, the fake romance mess around Lin gets dragged straight into daylight. Baby Momo shows up as a nickname people are already using against him, and the whole thing is so embarrassing it stops being private drama and becomes a public joke with a body count of pride. Back with Lin, he refuses to play along with the nickname or the role people keep shoving onto him. He denies being Baby Momo, reminds the other side about the promise they made, and walks off with his briefcase like he's done being handled, which is exactly the kind of attitude that gets him challenged every 5 minutes. That pressure only gets worse when rumors start snowballing around him. Someone says the story being spread about him is fake, and jokes are already turning cruel, including people mocking a girl for liking elephants, while another voice waves it off with the kind of cold dismissal that tells you nobody in this crowd is interested in the truth first. At the outdoor meeting spot, the social knife keeps twisting. A child snaps at Lin for acting arrogant, and when Lin finally arrives, the red-haired Han Shinyi, a competitive rival who never misses a chance to turn a scene into a challenge, greets him like she's been waiting to pounce. Then the real name drop lands. Yesterday's Fei Yu is revealed to be Zhao Yutong, the strong-willed student who has been circling Lin's life from the start. The classmates immediately recognize her as someone from their school, and suddenly this is not a private meeting anymore. It's a public event with everyone leaning in. Lin tries to shut the whole thing down by rejecting Baby Momo outright, but Zhao Yutong is not here to be brushed aside. She steps in, calls out to him, and grabs at his head like she has every right to force the issue, which is exactly the sort of move that makes a crowd gather just to see what blows up next. He Hui, Lin's arranged fiancé, and the woman people keep dragging into this mess, gets accused of going too far with a child, which turns the whole thing into a public humiliation arc instead of a private relationship problem. Lin answers by saying there is no chance between them and telling her to leave, because he would rather cut the tie clean than let anyone else write the story for him. That rejection doesn't calm the room, it just makes everyone talk louder. One boy says he'd want to leave school if he were in Lin's place, and another student mutters the same exhausted question the whole crowd is thinking, does he really still have to keep doing this? Then the scene turns chaotic again, as the rivalry keeps spilling over. A classmate asks why Zhao Yuteng came to see Lin and why everybody is calling him Baby Momo, while Han Shinyi's side is already framing the whole thing like a private game she wants Lin to play alone, because in this school every humiliation comes with a second act. In the hallway, Lin gets cornered by a classmate who wants to explain why this world feels so backwards, with women raised as fighters, while men are taught to stay pretty and obedient. Lin hears the lecture, sees the logic behind the school's weird power balance, and chooses the one move that matters more than arguing. He cuts the conversation short and heads back to class on his own terms. That refusal gets noticed fast. A blue-haired student points out that Lin doesn't even flinch at pressure, and then gets told to bring him in at noon, which means whatever Zhao Yutong wants is already moving from gossip into a real appointment. Back in class, the boys swarm Lin with the obvious question, because Zhao Yutong's name has turned him into the day's main event. The red-haired student spells it out. Zhao Yutong wants a one-on-one match, not a crowd, because she got interested in him yesterday and now wants to test him directly. The school's social mess spills into romance for a moment, and one student's jealousy turns into a very loud fantasy about suppressing that woman for centuries. That's the real joke of this place. Even a simple invitation gets treated like a declaration of war. Then the summons lands for real. The blue-haired student calls out that Zhao Yutong is waiting, but when Lin looks around, the room gives him nothing except confusion and the feeling that he's being steered towards something he can't quite see yet. At the school building, Lin's thoughts finally slip into the darker truth underneath all this noise. Mortals, like the people around him, are not his real limit anymore. His old power starts to surface, and the moment that aura blooms around him, it becomes clear he is not just acting tough in a classroom argument. He is waking up as something far more dangerous. At the same time, a woman with a calm smile treats him like prey she has already measured. She says he made the right decision, then openly frames his 18 years of life as something she can absorb, which tells you everything you need to know about her hunger and nothing good about his prospects. She goes further and dismisses his whole life as a drop in the ocean, while he remembers the one thing that still makes him unbearable to underestimate: 10,000 years of training, the defeat of the Celestial Emperor, and a kind of emptiness that only power used for a purpose can fill. The scene shifts from school drama to spiritual threat right there, because now the question is not whether Lin is strong, but who notices first that he still is. From outside the school, another woman watches all of this and finds the world interesting, because she carries her own old wound with her. She remembers being denied her father's approval just for being a girl, then putting on an evil mask and killing the men who thought they could despise and possess her at the same time, which means her interest in Lin comes from a place that has already turned cruel once before. Back in the present, Lin finally becomes the center of the room again when he stands with a bag and tells the girl following him that there can't be anything between them. She reacts with a stunned little sound, while another woman calls him sick, then quietly decides that regaining her strength and leaving this world soon is still the better path, because survival beats sentiment when every conversation can turn into a trap. Lin keeps moving, and that only deepens the mystery for the woman trailing him. He wonders why she keeps following him. She realizes he is heading for the rooftop, and the whole encounter tightens into a fight before the first word of it is even done. On the rooftop, the hidden cultivation conflict finally bursts out. Lin confirms what she has sensed. Her body snaps into combat control. His own body reacts from the inside, and when he suddenly yells at her to get down, it's clear that whatever woke up around him has stopped being a rumor and started becoming a real danger. Lin pulls back from the rooftop scuffle with a blunt little reality check. He was careless, and in a world like this, carelessness gets you hurt fast. He snaps at the woman to get lost, then immediately proves he is not here to be anyone's toy by putting distance between them and trying to act like this was all just a breath of fresh air, not a near disaster. Back in the classroom aftermath, Lin starts reading the room instead of the fight, because this reverse world runs on female initiative, and that means trouble can start before he even knows he is being courted or cornered. The woman comes at him with the usual mix of accusation and demand, says Yu Tong and the others have been looking for him, and then tries to pin the broken ribs on him like he signed a medical receipt for them. Lin refuses to be dragged into another arranged showdown, so he shuts the whole thing down and walks out, leaving the class hanging on the larger obligation waiting at Woju Mountain, that group outing with enough chi to matter. On the street, the bravado drops for a second, and he remembers the ugly part of what just happened. If someone really got broken, human lives are still precious here, and that means a stupid mistake can turn into legal trouble fast. Elsewhere on the rooftop, Lin's body keeps paying for his decision even after the argument is over, because his mortal shell is still too weak to handle the strain his old cultivation instincts keep pushing through it. He shivers in the wind, hungry and exposed, then realizes the other person up there is not reacting the way he expected, which turns this from a simple clash into a messy mix of injury, surprise, and personal motive. Back in the same rooftop confrontation, an adult steps in and immediately asks why Lin has come back, which tells you this situation has history and he has already made someone nervous once before. That tension gets worse when the girl pushes back over his condition, and the rooftop conversation starts circling around something more intimate than a fight, with the adult getting physically close while Lin tries to keep his own focus and dignity intact. Lin answers the mess in the only practical way he can manage. He tells her to wear a jacket, calls for an ambulance, and makes it clear that he is trying to pay off the trouble and move on instead of letting this become another binding favor. Then he goes straight at the larger lesson behind the moment, insisting that the human body is fragile, that appearance is not the point, and that the whole world's shallow obsession with looks is exactly the sort of stupidity he refuses to live under. The ambulance finally arrives, and the mess Lin just caused turns into public embarrassment for the woman being loaded up. The bystanders do what bystanders do best, turning a real injury into gossip, while she lies there seething because she knows this humiliation is going to stick. Back at the house, the blame game starts immediately. One man keeps pressing her about meeting Zhao Yutong and why she wanted to see Lin, because in this family, every conversation somehow turns into an interrogation, and the answer nobody likes is that Lin keeps refusing to play the role they picked for him. Lin does not let the pressure slide. When the target of the family's scolding tries to force the issue, he grabs control of the moment instead of backing off, and that tells everyone present the same thing. He is done being easy to push around. Then He Yanhui, Lin's arranged fiancé and classmate, steps in, acting like she can smooth the whole thing over with a grand promise to protect him. Lin catches the next hand that reaches for him, because what looks like help in this world usually comes with a leash attached. He Yanhui tries to force the moral high ground, blaming Lin for hitting elders and threatening to cut off his vacation allowance if he does not apologize. Lin refuses, and that refusal matters because it makes the whole room realize he is no longer treating their money and approval as things he needs to survive. Once the argument exposes his finances, Lin checks what he actually has left and finds the ugly truth: almost nothing. So he takes the only practical route available, tries to turn spare clothes into cash, and strips off what he can sell before anyone else gets ideas about owning his life through his wardrobe. That shortage pushes him to the next move. Lin taps into his past life cultivation memory, tests the muscle technique in his current body, and decides he can absorb spiritual energy instead of begging for money, which is the first real sign that this world's rules are not going to trap him for long. The very next problem is more ordinary and more annoying. Tomorrow means leaving again, so Lin calls Han Xinyi, a competitive rival who owns a motorcycle and likes acting unbothered, and tells her he is going to climb Wuju Mountain tomorrow. She brushes him off and tells him to come pick her up, which is exactly the kind of casual command he has to stop letting slide. The next day arrives, and Lin gets ready to move out on his own schedule instead of everyone else's. He tells his father to keep eating, says the bus is here, and heads out as if this is just a simple trip, even though it is really another step toward proving he can stand on his own in this reverse world. At the bus stop, Zixuan, Lin's classmate, shows up with the sort of helpful offer that can be either polite or strategic depending on the day. Before the trip even starts, he is already surrounded by people who want a piece of his time, his effort, or his future, and that is exactly the kind of pressure he keeps trying to outrun. On the bus to Wuzhou Mountain, the trip starts turning from a casual outing into social warfare. Zixuan and the girls immediately circle around Lin, and the whole conversation is really about one thing: who gets to control his time, his choices, and the story people tell about him. Lin answers that pressure the simple way he likes best, by getting up and putting distance between himself and the noise. He slides to the back alone, shuts his eyes, and refuses to perform for anybody, which is already its own kind of defiance in this world. Back on the highway, the mountain trip stops being a ride and turns into a moving test. Lin watches a motorcycle streak alongside the bus and gives himself a cautious little hope that this outing might actually lead somewhere worthwhile instead of just becoming another mess. That hope dies fast when the rider loses control and slams the whole scene into chaos. A masked warrior bursts out of the wreck, and suddenly everyone on the bus is staring at a real cultivator level threat instead of a tourist view, because the mountain road has turned into an ambush lane. Zhao Yutang, the strong-willed student who has been chasing Lin's attention in her own way, makes her move by bringing up his name and his strength, while also dangling the idea of taking him elsewhere after the trip. Lin shuts her down immediately, because he is not in the mood to be pulled around by another woman with a plan. The masked warrior then walks straight into the center of the conflict, and now the reason for the visit becomes obvious. Zhao Yutang has drawn something spiritual to her, and it is enough to make the attacker stop and inspect her instead of the bus. That little amulet matters because it proves this is not random trouble, it is cultivator trouble, and Lin is now standing near the edge of it. The others start treating the whole thing like a spectacle, cheering Zhao Yutang on, and even dragging Lin into the embarrassment of it by teasing him over whether he can climb, fight, or do anything useful at all. Lin gets hit from every direction at once, socially and physically, and the ugly part is that the crowd is starting to decide his value before he does. Then the situation stops being teasing and becomes a real clash in the air, the kind that tells everyone on the bus that this mountain trip is now a stage for hidden power. The immediate question is no longer whether Lin can stay out of trouble, but whether he can survive being dragged into a public battle before he even reaches Wuzhou Mountain. The fight spikes from teasing into a real test of timing. Lin's opponent tries to break away and strike from range, but Lin answers by forcing the attack to land while moving, which is exactly why the other side panics. Speed stops being a trick and becomes a threat to their whole plan. That sudden finish proves Lin is not just hanging on anymore, he is reading the fight fast enough to turn pressure into a win. Back with Zhao Yutang, the sharp-tongued student who has been watching Lin from the sidelines, she wants the one question everyone else is thinking: how did he land that so cleanly? Her surprise matters because the crowd has been treating Lin like dead weight, and now one clean victory forces them to admit he can actually fight back. Now the mountain trip begins for real at Wuzhou Mountain, the outing spot with abundant chi that turns a simple climb into a status check. The group hits the stairs and immediately starts exposing who is prepared, who is bluffing, and who is already looking for shade like that will negotiate with gravity. Zixuan plays the helpful guide, but even that kindness is part of the same contest, because everybody here is measuring how much pride they can afford to lose on the way up. As the climb drags on, weaker hikers start folding under the effort and making excuses, which only sharpens the social pressure around Lin. Zixuan offers to carry someone's things and even jokes about carrying him back if needed, but the real point is simple: this mountain is sorting people by stamina, and Lin refuses to let anyone file him under weak. He tells them to keep moving at their own pace, which sounds polite until you realize he is also refusing the escape hatch everyone expects him to take. That refusal spreads through the group as people notice Lin climbing harder than they expected and start connecting the wrong assumptions to the wrong man. One observer even points out that Zixuan only started pushing himself because Hui is near Lin, which turns the whole hike into a messy public scoreboard of pride, attraction, and embarrassment. By the time the comments get mean, Lin is already halfway up the mountain, and the joke is on everyone who thought his body would decide his limit for him. Lin keeps going until he reaches the top and claims the summit like it was always meant for him. That matters because the mountain is no longer just scenery. It is proof that his body can be trained, his will can outrun the crowd's expectations, and his old life's cultivation memory still has teeth. He stands there as if he has climbed straight over the version of himself everyone else wanted. At the summit, Lin finally explains why he pushed this hard. Wuzhou Mountain holds enough chi to let him restart his training. He frames the climb as preparation, not bragging, which is the smarter move, because now every step upward has a purpose beyond showing off. He even speaks like someone who has already beaten a demon lord once, and that little fantasy of victory is his way of reminding himself that this life is not going to be a slow surrender. Back on the mountain path, Lin's momentum keeps clashing with the people around him. When someone asks what he is doing and then complains after he sets her down, he answers in a way that sounds almost kind, but it really means he is not letting anyone else decide his route or his pace. Then he reaches for the next step in his own terms and treats the woman beside him less like a burden and more like a future he intends to control. Once the pressure drops, Lin goes straight into meditation, because the climb only matters if he turns it into power. That shift is the whole game for him now. Survive the social mess, then convert every scrap of effort into cultivation progress before the world finds a new way to push back. Elsewhere, the romance and suspicion threads keep tightening around him. Han Xinyi, the red-haired rival who knows how ugly the games around Lin can get, warns him not to be fooled, while someone else quietly agrees to a deal and walks off with paperwork in hand, like this whole world runs on contracts and bad timing. Right after that, the story drops into a more ordinary trap, where a receptionist quotes a room price and a customer books it for 2 months, because even in a cultivation mess, somebody still has to pay rent. Lin has already stopped being the easy target, and now the people around him start noticing the change. That matters, because once his body and name begin to spread, the social games around him get sharper, not gentler. Back in a quieter domestic moment, a man calls ahead to check the arrangements, and makes it clear he is showing up as someone's table companion, not some random hanger-on. Then he turns smug and promises a reveal. The sort of line that always means trouble is about to walk in wearing a nice face. The wrong door sends him into the next awkward collision, where Lin clocks his looks and immediately spirals into the kind of daydream that proves this world can turn one handsome face into a full social event. Lin catches himself before he humiliates himself completely, which is good because being flustered is still cheaper than being caught staring like a cat at a fish tank. Inside room 107, the confusion finally snaps into place. Han Xinyi, Lin's sharp-tongued rival, realizes she is dealing with the wrong person at first, then with Lin himself. He keeps it plain and says the only real change is that he has lost weight, but that small answer lands like a status update the whole room can feel. That recognition turns into proof when Lin's changed body gets treated like a full rebuild, not just a diet story. The point is simple, he is no longer the same soft target people remember, and everyone in the room sees it at once. From there, Lin and Han Xinyi move to the car, and the mood shifts from private surprise to public notice. Even the attendant steps in to help, which shows how quickly Lin's new look starts pulling attention before he has even left the driveway. In the car, Han Xinyi admits she was told Lin had real potential, and now his weight loss makes that warning look a lot less theoretical. She praises how he looks, Lin brushes it off, and her own thoughts drift toward what might have happened if she had treated him better before, which is a dangerous kind of hindsight to be sitting on. Then the story opens up into public rumor and formal notice, because Lin's changes are no longer staying between a few people in a room. Once his name starts circulating in that wider space, every relationship around him gets a new angle, especially the ones tied to money, status, and Zhao Yutang. Back with the people who now have to acknowledge him, Lin gets treated less like a forgotten boy, and more like someone whose return needs accounting for. He says he has lost weight and asks the obvious questions about money and allowance, but the cold answer makes the old family imbalance impossible to ignore, and the final "that's okay" lands like a thin piece over a very unbalanced room. The rumor stops being a rumor the moment someone sees Lin and actually says the name out loud. That one confirmation matters, because once people realize the fat kid has turned into Lin Mo, everybody nearby starts recalculating how close they want to stand. As the news spreads onto the street and into school, the attention flips from disbelief to full-on staring. Girls start reacting to Lin like he is a completely different person, which is basically true, and he loves none of it less than he loves being treated like a joke. Then Zhao Yutang, the strong-willed student who has been circling Lin's life, demands to know where the old fat boy went. Han Xinyi, the red-haired rival who likes speaking first and apologizing never, answers that there is no fat guy left to drag in, and that is how Lin's transformation becomes a public problem instead of a private one. Zhao Yutang does not buy the sudden change, so she pushes for an explanation while Han Xinyi is forced to spell out the simplest version of the truth. Lin spent his vacation climbing Wazhu Mountain, the chi-rich mountain that has become his weight loss shortcut, and his excuse. That leaves everyone asking the same dangerous question, which is whether this handsome new guy is really still the Lin they thought they knew. Back in the classroom, Zhao Yutang keeps pressing because Lin's new look makes her suspicious instead of impressed. She wants certainty, and Lin's whole problem is that certainty about him now makes him harder to ignore. The attention war gets uglier when Zhao Yutang starts sniffing around Song Yunxi, the gamer who is already tangled with Lin over account use. Song Yunxi bristles, denies the accusation, and the whole exchange turns Lin's makeover into a fresh excuse for old grudges to resurface. Then the teacher finally drags the class back into order, which is the only reason the room does not keep spiraling into gossip. She recognizes Lin, admits he has changed a lot over the break, and tries to move the seating around before the class turns into a staring contest. Lin refuses the seat change with a flat, public no, because even something that small feels like control being taken away from him again. The room snaps to him, and from that second on, everybody knows he is not just the quiet fat boy anymore, he is the one who pushes back. Outside the lesson itself, the gossip keeps growing as girls speculate that Lin must have done something extreme to get this handsome so fast. Han Xinyi takes that personally and starts thinking in possessive competitive terms, while another girl decides Lin's stamina is exactly the kind of thing worth dragging to dinner for more advice. So Lin's body change stops being a private project and becomes a social prize everybody wants to claim a piece of. Song Yoon-shi, a gamer who already has opinions nobody asked for, says the quiet part out loud. A lot of girls only start circling Lin now that he looks like a prize. That makes the new attention war feel fake, which is exactly why it starts getting ugly so fast. Lin does not play along. The moment one girl moves in like she has a claim on him, he cuts her off and tells her to get out of his way because he is guarding his own life now, not auditioning for anybody's affection. That cold wall only sharpens the social split, and the girls around him start turning attraction into competition. One brown-haired girl even treats it like a simple decision and picks Lin over the other boy, which tells you this has stopped being normal flirting and turned into a public status game. In the middle of all that noise, the setting shifts into a grand interior packed with people, where everybody seems to be watching everybody else. A girl offers Lin her seat and says she has something else to do, but he shuts it down again and makes it plain that he is not here to get pulled into other people's business. Back in the formal crowd, a man with a tablet and a woman beside him start picking apart whether the handsome guy they are hearing about is really Lin Mo, because his change is now so extreme it sounds suspicious. Another woman asks for help winning him over, and her friend's first guess is basically that he must have had plastic surgery, which is rude enough to be funny and wrong enough to keep the rumors spinning. Still in the same social mess, Lin keeps his distance while another woman tests how close she can get to him without being shut out. He stays composed, but the tension is doing the kind of work words no longer can, because everybody here wants a reaction, and Lin refuses to hand them one for free. Then the thread snaps into a new place and a new danger. On the roof, Lin thinks he might finally have a second to himself, only to find a woman already waiting there. Her red eyes make it clear this is not just another admirer, and when she studies him, she starts comparing the man in front of her to the fat version she expected, which means his transformation has become impossible to ignore. That rooftop meeting turns the romance tension into a chase, because she moves straight at him instead of talking like a normal person. Lin, offended on principle, and probably because she is already too close for comfort, tries to push back, and the whole exchange turns into a test of whether his body change is real enough to outrun trouble now. The chase keeps going until it becomes obvious neither of them is backing down for pride or curiosity. Lin finally stops and throws the question back at her, but she answers with attitude, and that is the point where the scene stops pretending this is casual meeting and starts feeling like a stubborn contest of wills. Then Lin says the most dangerous thing he could say in a reverse world full of women measuring every word. He is going to marry her. Whether that is defiance, strategy, or Lin being Lin, it locks the romance thread directly onto his power struggle, because now his private rejection of the world has become a public claim on one of its women. Lin frames the whole mess as a power play, not a romance, because in this world marriage is another arena, and he refuses to enter it as anyone's ornament. Then he snaps his attention onto He Yan-hui, the arranged fiancé and classmate who keeps forcing him to answer for himself, and the chase starts turning into a contest he cannot ignore. He keeps moving because stopping would mean admitting she has momentum over him, so Lin pushes forward and swears he cannot lose. That stubborn run is the moment his rejection hardens into something more deliberate. He is not just resisting the world, he is trying to outmaneuver it. The tension gets physical fast, with Lin and He Yan-hui locking into the kind of argument where nobody is really listening anymore, because both of them want the upper hand. He tries to hold his ground in the middle of school territory, and the fight is no longer about a single word or a single glance, but about who gets to define the space around him. Lin then goes straight for the one thing that matters in a reverse world like this. He challenges who she is, what she has been doing, and why she thinks she can keep forcing herself into his life. That turns the scene from noisy bickering into a real standoff, because he is no longer reacting, he is interrogating her position and refusing to be managed. The argument mutates into open accusation, with the woman crying foul and threatening to drag the situation into public punishment, while Lin keeps the phone in hand and stays annoyingly calm. She loses control, he gains leverage, and that imbalance is the point. Lin is learning how to survive by staying colder than the people trying to corner him. Her rage peaks, then collapses into stunned confusion when she realizes he is not backing down the way she expects. She throws out one last promise to win next time, but the damage is done, because Lin now sees exactly how much pressure it takes to shake someone like her. Back in the present, Lin reflects on how exhausting women can be when they are determined to turn every interaction into a battle, and for once he lets himself feel relieved that he got through it. That relief is short-lived though, because the story immediately widens into something darker, a dead body on the ground, and talk of a demonic sword mean the world around him is not just socially hostile, it is spiritually dangerous too. That threat explodes outward as the sword and whatever is bound to it tear across the sky above the building, which means the hidden cultivation world is still very much alive and watching. Lin's private problems are already bad enough, but now the scene reminds him that power, danger, and reputation keep colliding, whether he wants them to or not. The mood lurches again when Han Sin-yi, the competitive rival who keeps testing Lin's patience, smiles like she has already won while he offers to take her home later. She refuses the easy answer, and Lin immediately warns her off Zhao Yutang, the girl he treats like a social landmine, because he is trying to keep one woman from becoming another trap. Han Shinyi then opens up about a classmate who was cheated, bullied, and driven to suicide, and the story makes her less of a tease and more of someone carrying real grief under the surface. Lin shuts the distance down at once and tells her not to get close, which is cold but consistent. He is protecting his own path by refusing emotional entanglement. Even then, the pressure does not stop, because another voice accuses Lin of leaving a woman hanging while he says he is in a hurry and tries to move on. Someone else calls after him, implying he has spent the whole vacation searching, and that leaves Han Shinyi visibly shaken while Lin keeps walking toward the next decision he would rather not make. Outside, Lin gets into a taxi instead of standing still and sorting out anybody's feelings, which tells you exactly where his priorities are. Motion, distance, control. In the cab, his face finally gives away the cost of that choice, because he looks resolute and miserable at the same time, like a man who knows survival is getting expensive. Lin stands alone by the parked taxi on a road lined with yellow autumn trees, and the quiet finally matches the decision he just made. He admits he still has some strength left in his soul, but today he cannot get through this by leaning on anyone else, which is the real cost of his stubborn independence. Back in the rain, Lin pushes into a glowing ritual circle and immediately runs into Demon Chi, the first sign that the spiritual mess around him is real and not just some dramatic hobby for lunatics. That forces him into a fast response, because once demon energy starts moving, hesitation turns into getting buried. Zhao Yutang, a strong-willed student who has been circling Lin's life for a while, appears from the distance and keeps the pressure on instead of letting him disappear into his own thoughts. She watches how much he has changed, warns him that losing the weight only makes him more likely to attract shallow attention, and Lin gets the unpleasant reminder that getting stronger also changes how the world tries to use him. Zhao Yutang then turns practical and tells him to report trouble if he needs help, which Lin answers with the coldest kind of memory lapse. He says he does not remember her. That little lie does two jobs at once, because it keeps him guarded and it tells her he is not handing out trust for free anymore. Zhao Yutang strips off her outer jacket and steps in with the kind of athletic confidence that says she is done being treated lightly. She restrains a masked man, adjusts his helmet, and snipes at him about protective gear, which makes it plain that this part of the story is no longer about awkward school drama, but about people closing in on something dangerous. The chase tightens when Lin notices that Zhao Yutang is moving straight toward the source of the demonic energy, so her path is now the same path as the threat. That matters because it turns her from a noisy rival into a problem he cannot ignore, especially when she walks into the compound and starts demanding answers from the people hiding there. In the compound, Zhao Yutang confronts a cultivator who panics at the sight of a gun, and the exchange instantly shows how badly the old rules are breaking down. She answers his law talk with contempt. He begs for his life, and the whole thing stops looking like a polite investigation and starts looking like a hunt. Zhao Yutang does not back off, because she is trying to force the truth out of him before he can keep lying his way through it. When he claims he has only refined chickens, she cuts straight to the danger behind that excuse. If he can refine small things today, he can justify refining people tomorrow, which is the exact sort of logic that turns cultivation into a landfill fire. The cultivator stumbles into his own greed and decides that if refining chickens brings results, refining Zhao Yutang should work even better. She recognizes the logic for the trash it is, but she refuses to let him finish the thought, and she answers with a clean, decisive attack before his appetite can become someone else's death sentence. Lin reads the demonic aura on the spot and realizes this is no ordinary cultivation technique, but something closer to a demonic sword art, which means Zhao Yutang is walking into a trap she cannot see yet. The threat finally reveals its true face in front of him, and the story makes the danger unmistakable. Lin's self-reliance is hardening, but now he has to use that power fast enough to keep someone else from paying for it. Zhao Yutang is already in the kind of fight that exposes the whole system for what it is. Some demons do not just hit hard, they actively corrupt cultivation itself, so every exchange is a test of whether she can keep her mind clear long enough to survive. She drives back one monster after another, but the pressure keeps rising, which means this is no clean duel, it is a trap built to grind her down and make her panic. Then the demon answers the way monsters always do when they stop pretending to be graceful, by grabbing Zhao Yutang and forcing her to burn through power just to stay alive. She breaks free at a cost, blood showing on her hand, because winning the moment is not the same as winning the fight, and that is exactly the kind of injury Lin notices before anyone else does. Back in the battle, Lin steps in beside the wounded Zhao Yutang and makes the real problem obvious. Her opponent is not just strong, it is hiding behind a spiritual disguise that most people would mistake for a normal weapon or technique. Zhao Yutang spits out one blunt word about his body, which is her rude way of saying the fight has already forced her to notice he is not the same lazy boy she expected. Lin does not waste time pretending the sword matters, because to him it is just a tool, not a miracle. What matters is that he stands there calm while Zhao Yutang locks in, and that shift tells the story plainly. His cultivation memory gives him a way to cut through appearances, while everyone else is still reacting to the flash. That advantage gets tested when the horned creature blocks the attack, and the whole exchange turns into a contest of raw staying power instead of cheap tricks. Zhao Yutong realizes something is wrong when the enemy suddenly stops pressing, which is the dangerous part of a strong opponent, the moment they stop behaving like a brute and start acting like a strategist. The battlefield then reveals what Lin has really stumbled into. Not just a demon, but a higher, more sacred-looking form wrapped around the same thread, the kind of thing that can crush ordinary cultivators through sheer spiritual force. Zhao Yutong is overwhelmed before she can even breathe properly, and that matters because it shows the enemy does not need to kill her fast if it can simply make her mind give up first. Somewhere else, inside a temple hall, the story pulls back to the bigger rules behind all of this. The master explains the Tao as the source that balances heaven and earth, and when the bell rings anyway, it signals that something far above an ordinary disturbance has just broken into the world. That is not decorative mystery, that is the system itself sounding the alarm. The master's reaction makes the scale snap into focus. The father of Taoism has reincarnated, and that immediately raises the stakes around the venerable demon, because now somebody in authority realizes the spiritual order is changing fast. The next move is not theory, it is action, as the figure prepares to deal with the venerable demon, and then with the woman who has seen too much. Zhao Yutong is still in the blast radius of that hidden war, and her delighted reaction at what she sees tells you she has found something beautiful enough to lower her guard for half a second, which is exactly how trouble gets its teeth in. The figure forces for getting onto the witness, but the cost of pushing too hard is immediate, because the one using residual soul power realizes he has overloaded it, and may have burned his own foundation to keep the secret buried. Lin pulls away from the supernatural mess for a second, and tells himself he has to come back soon, which is the first sign he is still thinking like a cultivator, not a pawn. That matters because the secret war is still active, but he cannot keep fighting it head-on if his body and soul are both running on fumes. Back in the human mess, someone gets distracted by Lin's face and starts asking where he comes from, while Han Xinyi immediately does what she always does and turns tension into a threat with a smile. Lin admits the ugly truth to himself too. His soul is damaged, so all that old power is mostly locked behind a wall he cannot force open for free. Then the humiliation lands where it hurts, because Lin remembers being the kind of powerhouse who could call himself an emperor, and now he is getting talked down to like a problem that can be moved by hand. He refuses to fold inside, even if the body he has now cannot back up the pride yet. The pressure spikes again when Zhao Yutong is pushed toward him, and Han Xinyi steps in like she is settling a score instead of starting one. That is the real trap here. Lin is trying to stay hidden, but every public shove drags him back into a fight he did not choose. After the beating, Lin switches tactics and talks to Zhao Yutong like this whole mess is under control, because right now, survival means calming the people around him before they make things worse. He ends up beside her motorcycle, which tells you the scene has shifted from raw confrontation to a quieter kind of leverage, where information and timing matter more than fists. Zhao Yutong keeps the social war going by reminding him he used to ignore his weight, and Lin fires back that she stood him up again, because apparently nobody in this circle can keep a simple appointment like civilized people. Their argument is not really about games or schedules though, because it shows both of them already know the other is unreliable, in a way that can hurt. Lin reports that the job is done, but he leaves himself a warning in the same breath. The target was dangerous, so this was never a clean win. Zhao Yutong's answer confirms the scale of the hidden threat, because whatever he dealt with was powerful and evil, which means the supernatural problem is still sitting under the school life nonsense like a loaded trap. The chase breaks wide open next, as a masked rider orders someone to leave, and then gets knocked off the motorcycle in the middle of the scramble. The important part is not the spill itself, but the fact that the hidden conflict is now spilling into open movement, and nobody gets to pretend this is all private anymore. Right after that, Zhao Yutong gets pulled back into the normal world's social garbage when she reacts awkwardly to a shampoo comment, and Lin gets called over by another group of students. That snap back to school life matters because it shows the same crowd that mocks him also keeps circling his personal business, so he never really gets a clean break. Lin finally ends up alone in the hallway, breathing hard, and that is where the real race starts. He knows he cannot keep burning soul power forever, so he reaches for the one thing he still has left, the magic sword fragment, which he plans to use as a cultivation shortcut, before his damaged foundation gives out completely. Zhao Yutong, the strong-willed student who keeps circling Lin's life, stumbles into an awkward kind of honesty. Lin answers her with a smooth marriage promise, but the narration makes his real attitude clear. He is already treating this like a game he expects to win, not a vow he plans to honor. Zhao Yutong walks off with that deeper look on her face, because now she has to decide whether he means anything he says or if he is just playing her like everyone else. Back in the present, Lin turns the whole mess into training instead of romance, sitting down to sharpen his mind while he keeps rebuilding his body and cultivation from the scraps he still has left. That matters because he cannot afford to waste time on school gossip when his foundation is still damaged, and the one thing he controls right now is how hard he pushes himself. He is trying to become dangerous before the people around him finish turning him into a joke. In the classroom, Zhao Yutong and the other students start reading Lin as the kind of handsome cold guy who draws attention without even trying. That sets off the usual school noise, where people talk about him like he is a rumor instead of a person, and it only widens the gap between how he sees himself and how everyone else does. The joke, of course, is that nobody in that room is actually ignoring him. Then the social pressure turns petty and personal, as one girl challenges another for even inviting Lin to eat, and the whole group starts treating his lunch table like contested territory. The argument is not really about food at all. It is about status, jealousy, and who gets to stand closest to the boy everyone suddenly wants to claim. Lin is becoming a prize in other people's drama, which is exactly the kind of trap he hates. Outside the classroom, a blonde woman takes charge and calls someone over, and the crowd instantly starts speculating about what Zhao Yutang really feels for Lin. That rumor matters because it pulls his private life into public view, so even his body image and old insults come back around as social ammunition. When Lin hears people bring up how often he got called fat, he is forced to remember exactly why he refuses to stay weak. On the rooftop now, Zhao Yutang shows up first and tries to push Lin away, but he refuses to yield the place he already won from her before. Lin answers like a man who has stopped asking permission, and he calls the rooftop his territory because the last contest gave him a foothold he intends to keep. That turns the whole thing into a public rivalry, not a private squabble, and everybody watching knows the next round will decide who gets to stand above the other. Now the scene shifts into a strategy fight, because Zhao Yutang does not just want the space, she wants to outplay Lin in a contest of brains and nerve. The white-haired figure, the go board, and Lin's careful warning all point to the same thing. This is no longer about brute force, but about whether he can read the board well enough to survive a game where one mistake ends him. And with rivalry, romance, and social pressure all tangled together, he is now fighting for his place in a world that keeps trying to decide him for him. On the rooftop above the city, Lin and Zhao Yutang are locked in a test of nerve, and neither of them wants to be the first to blink. Her whole point is simple. If he cannot beat her, he has to admit he loses on her terms, which is exactly the kind of social trap Lin refuses to step into. Classes are over, so the fight should end too, but that only makes the pressure sharper. Lin tells her to be proud of the progress she has made, and quit while she still can, then immediately makes his own line clear. He will not accept a draw, because for him, half measures are just another kind of loss. Zhao Yutang tries to save the match by snapping a picture of the board so they can continue tomorrow, and that buys both of them time. It is a small move, but it matters, because this whole contest is no longer about one game. It is about who can keep the upper hand once the moment stops being dramatic. Back in the present, her body gives out before her pride does, and Zhao Yutang stumbles straight into Lin. He hits her with a sort of accusation that turns an awkward accident into a social problem in one sentence, and she fires back hard enough to prove she is not the type to fold just because she is embarrassed. Zhao Yutang is left alone with her frustration, and she turns it into motive instead of excuses. She swears she will study tactics tonight and beat Lin tomorrow, which tells you everything about the real battlefield here. She is trying to outthink him as much as outplay him. Somewhere else, another problem is already stirring. A woman is yelling into her phone because Lin is ignoring her calls, which is never a calm sign in a story like this, and when the man outside the school answers that he is still on campus, she comes roaring over on a motorcycle, and calls him slow before she even gets close. That confrontation ends the moment Zhao Yutang decides she is done wasting time, even if she is still clearly looking for trouble. She drops the fight for now, but not the score, and Lin answers by sending her along on the black sphere with white wings, which is his way of taking control of the pace instead of letting her drag him around. The ride across the city turns the argument into a moving problem instead of a shouting match. Lin shows up at Zhao Yutang's house, notes that it is big, and then walks straight into the next trap when she warns him not to touch her things, because the moment he crosses that threshold, the game stops being public and gets personal. Lin immediately calls out the obvious risk. She is the one who invited him over, so pretending innocence now is a little rich. Then he asks the question hanging over the whole visit, whether she wants to do something to him, and Zhao Yutang answers in the most dangerous way possible by sounding like she already has ideas. Zhao Yutang pushes too hard and gets checked for it, because Lin is not interested in being handled like some easy target. The exchange snaps from flirtation to combat, and the scene makes the real point plain. In this world, desire and violence keep stepping on each other's toes. Now the scene shifts into the ghost of a threat hovering behind the romance and rivalry. Zhao Yutang's red-eyed fury spills into a vow to crush him in today's game, while the graveyard vision tells a darker story underneath it all. One side has already been marked dead, betrayed, and too weak, and those words are not about a board game anymore. Back at the computer, Lin and Zhao Yutang are dragged into the numbers behind the humiliation, and the score says exactly what the tension has been hiding. 47 losses and 0 wins is not a rivalry, it is a warning. And when Lin offers one more game and Zhao Yutang refuses and chooses a taxi instead, she is backing away before the whole thing swallows her pride completely. Elsewhere, He Yanhui, Lin's arranged fiancé and classmate, gets pulled into the fallout when she hears that Lin skipped afternoon classes. She asks what on earth he is doing, then checks the group and rushes in after a message says something big has happened, which means Lin's private mess is about to become everyone's problem. Back in the past, Lin is still caught in the ugly middle of reverse world life, where a single cruel message can turn into a real threat. Yi Yanhui, his arranged fiancé and classmate, reads a curse wishing someone would crash their motorcycle, and that kind of hate is exactly how this world turns private spite into public damage. That poison opens the door for something worse. A ghostly figure steps in and offers revenge like it is a normal business transaction. He Yanhui is shocked because this is not just bullying anymore. It is the first sign that something supernatural is sniffing around her anger and trying to cash it in. The threat becomes direct when a demon answers her challenge and promises power instead of comfort. Lin recognizes the pattern at once, because this is the kind of dirty bargain old cultivation stories always warn about. The sort that never ends with free help, and usually ends with somebody regretting the whole arrangement. Lin takes the deal anyway, because if power is the price of survival, he is willing to learn the ugly way. The divine being offers an immortality pact tied to defeating Emperor, and Lin starts channeling that force, only to realize the contract is real, but the strength is not landing in his body yet, which is a nasty little catch for a man trying to get stronger fast. So Lin pivots to the smarter move. If raw power will not open immediately, he uses the dream of the soul skill to learn through someone else's mind. That turns the whole scene into a test of control, because he is not just fighting for strength anymore. He is trying to master a method that lets him steal progress without wasting time like a fool. Later, the recap jumps forward into Zhao Yutong's world, where her own pressure is showing in a completely different arena: gaming. She is frustrated after losing again and again, and the onlookers start wondering why she keeps grinding at all, which only underlines how stubborn she is and how little anyone around her understands what she is chasing. Now in the present, Zhao Yutong is still carrying that same restless energy as she moves through a day packed with obligations. She brushes past the usual routine, passes the specialized equipment, and even rides her motorcycle out toward the lit mansion at night, because her life never really gives her a clean break from one demand to the next. At the mansion, Zhao Yutong is distracted by a far more personal problem. Lin smells so good that it throws her off balance. That tiny reaction matters, because this arc keeps tying attraction, rivalry, and cultivation together until even a stupid scent becomes part of the tension. Then the story swings into a wedding scene, and the ceremonial nonsense finally reveals who is being pushed where. The officiant introduces Chen Shili as the bride. She takes the microphone to speak happily, and Zhao Yutong tells everyone to wait for it to finish, because this is no longer just romance theater, but a public ritual with something hidden underneath it. That hidden part snaps into focus when the bride's wish is treated as fulfilled, and she is told to leave, only for a beast-like entity to question how easily human desires were satisfied. The moment confirms the ugly logic behind the scenes. Someone has been feeding on wishes, and Chen Shili is now standing at the end of that bargain whether she wanted to or not. Back in the present again, Zhao Yutong is suddenly thrown into open combat, and now the story stops pretending this is about ordinary social drama. She overpowers the beast, finishes it cleanly, and even gets a grateful response after the kill, which means she is no longer just a girl reacting to trouble. She is becoming someone who can answer it head on. Zhao Yutong stands over the ruined beast, and the whole mess finally makes its meaning clear. This was never a clean rescue, it was a failed feeding. When the pink-haired girl Chen Shili panics and blames Zhao Yutong for killing it, the fear in the room flips from the beast to the truth that someone has been using people as fuel. The warning about Chen Shili's husband lands like poison with manners. He's a fox demon who drains women dry and keeps them as wives, which means the real weapon here is not brute strength, but seduction, lies, and a contract dressed up as romance. Zhao Yutong refuses to fold, and that refusal matters because evil cultivation only works when someone agrees to be treated like prey. Now the hidden hand steps back into view and orders the cleanup finished, because the fight was never the end goal. Zhao Yutong crushes the tiny creature underfoot, and the bodies scattered around the floor make it obvious how many people have already been chewed up by the scheme. The Foxman is exposed as a shapeshifter, useful to someone higher up, which tells Lin the network behind all this is bigger than one monster with bad manners. The fox tries to run, but running is the only honest thing it does. The scene then drops into dark water and a drifting spirit, and the tone changes from hunting a beast to bargaining with death, which is where the real trap starts. In that void, the spirit offers a contract: serve the Emperor for 10 years and get a new life in return. Lin's shock is the important part here, because he is seeing how this world packages exploitation as opportunity, and that is exactly the kind of system a poor cultivator gets pressured into signing with a smile. The offer bends into cultivation logic when Lin sits over the diagram and realizes he has heart power, the kind of internal edge that can make a nobody hard to control. Then Chen Shushu introduces herself as the one serving master, and the real lesson hits. People fall into evil cultivation because the ordinary path is starved of resources, so the wrong door starts looking like the only door. Lin's next question about immortality shows what he really wants now, which is not just survival, but a route back to the top without selling his soul on the way. Back in the classroom now, the supernatural lesson collides with ordinary school gossip, because Lin's life never gets to stay simple for long. He spots snacks on the desk and immediately suspects Song Yunshi, which tells us the social battlefield is already circling him again. Song Yunshi gets dragged into the conversation as the guy whose snacks might have been saved for later, and that tiny detail matters because this school runs on favors, embarrassment, and who is noticed by whom. Then He Yanhui steps in angry about what the food means, and another girl snaps back that buying for a fiancé is normal. So Lin is already stuck in a public relationship mess before he even says a word. The classroom pressure keeps climbing as the bully tells Lin to back off. Then the gossip starts traveling by phone faster than dignity ever could. Once Zhao Yutang hears that He Yanhui is supposedly stealing her man, the rumor becomes a real threat. But Zhao Yutang swats it aside by saying she is not interested in the fat guy anymore, which is her way of admitting Lin has changed enough to matter. She ends by inviting everyone to lunch, and that turns the whole rumor war into a public test of where Lin actually stands. At school, the rumor war stops being background noise and turns personal. A girl tells Lin that Zhao Yutang is not taking him seriously, and Zhao Yutang snaps back by threatening to beat Lin up if he listens to gossip. That leaves Lin in the middle of a public mess where nobody can agree whether he is being insulted, protected, or recruited, which is exactly how school drama stays exhausting. Back in Zhao Yutang's head, she shrugs off the fat guy nonsense, but the reaction is telling because Lin has finally become interesting enough to bother her. On the rooftop, she keeps pushing him, throws the weight insult at him again, and Lin has to sit with how cruel she can be even while she keeps circling him. He catches her words, keeps his phone in hand, and starts thinking past the noise. After school, he is going to look for materials to make spirit charms, because if hidden trouble is around, he needs tools, not gossip. When Zhao Yutang calls out to him again, this is no longer just teasing, it is a direct challenge, and she makes it clear she expects him to notice her. Lin does notice, but he also makes the boundary plain. She is not his ex-girlfriend, and he is not going to let her rewrite the situation like he owes her a starring role in his life. She answers by dangling her motorcycle and acting like the whole thing is a casual ride, which is her version of control, not kindness. Then the ride turns into a test of nerves. Zhao Yutang drives hard and warns Lin not to chase her like the other men do, while Lin keeps trying to shut the whole idea down and tell her they are just classmates, so she should not get too involved with him. She brushes that off by saying plenty of men want her and that she only bothered with him because of a gambling loss, which is a neat little way to insult him while pretending this is all casual. Zhao Yutang clearly likes games, but she is also the type to turn a motorcycle into a threat. The scene then shifts from school drama to a darker network behind it. Someone names Chen Shushu and gives an order to help the master enter the web of the dark door, which makes the hidden side of this world feel less like rumor and more like a system already reaching for people. That matters because Lin is no longer just dodging classmates. He is brushing up against a structure that wants access, obedience, and maybe worse. A delivery from White Fox follows, and it looks like a normal package handoff until the details start smelling wrong. White Fox plays courier, asks for a 5-star rating, and Lin inspects the item long enough to notice something off about the paper doll, then uses a brush on a yellow surface until the markings bloom red and the room fills with a completed charm. The point is simple, Lin is not just stumbling into the dark door, he is learning how to handle its materials before it handles him. After that, the evidence tightens around Zhao Yutang herself. Lin sees that she also visits the dark door website, and that connects her directly to the same strange online trail he has been following. He then identifies a spiritual stone from Zhao Yutang and ties it to a missing teenager case and venerable demon, which turns her from an annoying rival into part of a much uglier mystery. Much later, the conflict leaves school gossip behind and turns openly hostile around a suited man. 3 people crowd him and hurl abuse, treating him like someone who has betrayed what he was supposed to be, and the pressure is no longer social, it is personal and ugly. Even then, the man stays calm with his eyes closed, which tells you he is either dangerous, disciplined, or both. And that kind of composure usually means somebody is about to get hurt. A woman named Venerable Demon's agent is still trying to steer the mess from the shadows, while the men on the stairs make it clear this whole thing has moved past school gossip and into coordinated pressure. Someone thinks Lin can be pushed around with manipulation, which is exactly why the next few seconds turn ugly so fast. The attack snaps into the open when the woman goes for Lin, but he answers harder than she expects and instantly flips the balance. Now it is not about flirting, rumors, or cover stories anymore, because Lin is proving he can punish anyone who tries to grab him and still stand there like he owns the room. Also, getting lifted by the neck is a very bad sign for your afternoon. Right after that clash, the red-eyed woman's reaction and the arguments around it show the real fight underneath the fight. People are arguing over who started this, who is lying, and whether Lin has already been dragged into a trap he does not even fully see yet. That is the problem with schemes built on hypnosis and half-truth, since once they wobble, everybody starts blaming everybody else. Lin arrives to check on the situation, and the awkward part is that his concern is now part of the drama too, because other people keep reading his choices as proof of loyalty, betrayal, or interest. So when one woman thanks him and another one immediately starts policing who is touching whose hand, the whole mess shifts from direct hostility into relationship warfare, which is somehow more exhausting. Back in the present confrontation, Lin shuts the interference down and warns Zhao Yutang not to meddle, while she keeps pressing about the hypnosis and whatever plan is still not fully broken. He is trying to drag the conversation back under his control, because if the spell keeps working, then the real battle is not with fists at all. It is with whoever keeps steering people's heads. Meanwhile, the people on the enemy side stop pretending this is just a personal dispute and start talking like coordinators, with a cat servant ready to post targets on the dark door web and a terrified bystander calling the order insane. That tells you exactly what Lin is dealing with now. Not one jealous rival, but a network that is willing to turn his name into a hunt. After the pressure spikes, Lin finally gets a quiet moment and uses it like a strategist instead of a punching bag, checking whether there is any real progress with Zhao Yutang. He relaxes for a second, fixes his look, and studies the social board as carefully as any fight, because in this world, a good reputation can buy you room and a bad one can get you buried. Then the scene opens onto a new setting, outdoors at the rooftop go board, where Lin and Han Shinyi keep circling each other through a game that is never only about the game. Han Shinyi, his competitive rival and motorcycle-owning troublemaker, keeps watching him while he answers with just enough restraint to avoid handing her an easy win, which means neither of them is willing to fully fold. At the edge of the rooftop game, Lin and Han Shinyi keep testing each other, but the real problem is that his public image is turning into a magnet for attention. So when someone shouts to stop and another voice snaps that nobody should be bothering him, the little social duel suddenly starts looking like a full-on claim over Lin. Then the story pivots to He Yanhui's house, and her shocked confession tells you the quiet part out loud. She thought Lin was just another lazy pretty boy, but he has already learned how to push back. Inside, Lin lies under a strange spellwork setup while he explains the trick behind it, which means the house visit is not a visit anymore. It is an investigation, and somebody in this home is hiding something nasty. That hidden pressure gets a face when a white paper doll becomes the focus of the search, then gets shredded by hostile force before anyone can protect it. He Yanhui realizes she is being watched, and the presence behind her is Venerable Demon, a supernatural threat who wants the whole plan kept intact. In other words, Lin is no longer just dealing with jealous girls and gossip, because now somebody is actively guarding a secret inside this mess. On the road outside campus, that secrecy turns physical when a masked rider crashes into Zhao Yutang's motorcycle and tries to keep moving like nothing happened. Zhao Yutang, the strong-willed student who keeps circling Lin, checks on him instead of backing off, and Lin answers with the blunt truth that this world has taught him how to be ruthless back. The point is simple: his new life is forcing him to act sharper, because hesitation keeps getting punished. The next turn lands harder, because Lin finally says he is going to He Yanhui's house tonight, which turns Zhao Yutang from worried to suspicious in a second. She pushes him for the reason, he snaps back at her, and the argument escalates into violence with Zhao Yutang attacking him again and again like she thinks pain will make him talk. Lin, though, uses the damage as leverage instead of surrendering, warning her about the medical bill and the consequences if she keeps swinging at him, which is pure Lin. Turn trouble into paperwork and make someone else pay for the privilege. Zhao Yutang finally backs off and accepts the terms, which matters because Lin has turned a screaming match into leverage. She does not need her agreement so much as her silence, and for the first time tonight, she gives him both. Back at He Yanhui's house, the visit stops feeling like a normal errand the second He Yanhui appears at the doorway with a weapon and then settles inside like she owns the danger in the room. That is the real trap here. Lin did not come to a quiet house. He walked into somebody who has been preparing for trouble. Inside, Zhao Yutang starts finding the ugly little evidence that this place is not just messy, it is obsessed. Photos of He Yanhui cover the walls, and the books on the floor are literally labeled as Lin's manual, which tells you someone has been studying him like a project instead of a person. That discovery kicks the case wide open. Now the problem is no longer one awkward house visit, but a pattern of stalking and control tied to missing teenagers. The search pressure jumps from private suspicion to public investigation, and Phoenix Group starts looking like the kind of resource people call when the soft approach is already dead. The next clash comes fast, because once the investigation points at hidden puppets, somebody tries to shut it down with force. A brutal strike lands, the kind that turns the conversation into a warning, and the whole situation starts smelling like a setup built to feed on young men and hide the evidence. Lin answers that threat with his own power, and this is the important shift. He stops being the body everyone expects to manage and starts acting like the one person in the room who can actually push back. The fight is no longer about surviving embarrassment, it is about proving that the people hunting around him can be hit back. Even better, Lin is not just swinging blindly, he is already using artifacts, reading energy, and handling a strange box hard enough that the people around him start calling him terrifyingly efficient, while his servant treats the whole thing like routine cleanup after a disaster. That artifact confirms the deeper game. It is built to find where yin energy is strongest in the city, which means the enemy is not just a person but a distribution problem with a bad attitude. Lin activates it, and the search narrows toward Shenshili, turning the supernatural mess into a very specific hunt. Then the scene snaps back to the immediate human mess because Zhao Yutang is still carrying the injuries Lin just treated and the tension that comes with it. She shows up needy, embarrassed, and a little too direct, while Lin makes her spell out what hurts, which is exactly the sort of medical interview that somehow feels like interrogation. Zhao Yutang finally says the part that matters. People are looking for He Yanhui, and Lin is supposed to remember what she did to him. Lin cuts her off before she can overthink it, because he understands the real bargain now, and she immediately offers to help him find He Yanhui instead of just standing there and panicking like a normal person. Lin closes the exchange with that hard, narrowed stare that says he is done being managed by anyone. He now has a lead on He Yanhui, a search tied to missing people, and a city full of power plays closing in around him, which means the next move is his alone. Back at the school, Lin stops treating Zhao Yutang like a problem, and finally checks whether she's okay, because the search for He Yanhui just turned from gossip into a real lead. Zhao Yutang admits the part that matters, that He Yanhui has a rotten reputation, and people are already hunting for her, so Lin cuts the pity short and tells the girls to leave him alone before they drag him back into another mess. Right then, the transfer class bait lands exactly where it is meant to. The school starts buzzing about a very nice new boy, which means someone is dangling a fresh target in front of a crowd that loves staring. When the green-haired student asks for his name, the whole setup makes one thing clear. Lin's new school life is already turning into a stage where hidden identities get tested in public. A beat later, Zhao Yuting shows she is not just standing around worrying, because she starts moving like a fighter who expects trouble and knows how to answer it. Lin reads the room, keeps his head down, and decides he is not staying long enough to get pulled into the wrong kind of attention, which is the first sign he is still trying to control the board instead of letting the school do it for him. That is also why he pushes the conversation back onto the only thing that matters, whether Zhao Yutang is really okay, and whether she can still move on her own. She snaps back that she is cured and threatens to call the police if he grabs her legs again, which tells you their tension is already messy enough to be dangerous before the real search even starts. Then Zhao Yutang lays out the actual trap behind Hianhui, explaining that Hianhui wanted to keep a group of men and was using a disguise to pull it off. Lin connects the dots fast and figures she has to be hidden somewhere like an old bewitched mansion, which matters because now this is no longer a vague missing person problem but a hunt for a place built to hide the truth. Lin ends the school exchange on his own terms and walks out, because every extra second here just invites more people to manage him. The hunt is moving, the lie around Hianhui is getting clearer, and the next clue is already leading them away from classrooms and straight into a bigger game. Elsewhere, the search turns into money, and the bidding starts low enough to sound manageable before it explodes into absurdity. When the price jumps to 5 million, and the system still caps the whole thing at 10 million yen before calling it sold, the point is obvious: somebody with real resources is chasing the same target, and Zhao Yutang is right in the middle of it. The trail then narrows to a location target, and Zhao Yutang uses a strange compass to confirm they are near the place they need. She explains that it can point from hundreds of miles away, and that the area is packed with strong yin energy, so Lin orders the group to hold position while he explores ahead, and the others stand armed, ready for whatever this place is hiding. That choice drops them straight into combat, because the hidden site does not open like a normal house or ruin. It answers with a living threat that forces Lin to draw his sword. The fight is no longer about finding Hianhui, it is about surviving the thing guarding the path to her, and Lin has to prove he can stand in front of everyone instead of just talking tough. Once the enemy holds long enough, the whole group has to stop thinking like searchers and start fighting like a formation, which means this is now a coordinated kill or be killed push. That shift matters because it turns the schoolside scramble into a real battle over territory, and Zhao Yutang's focus hardens when she realizes this mess is bigger than one missing woman. Zhao Yutang finally commits to the fight and lands a decisive hit, only to get swallowed by the enemy's counterattack before she can celebrate it. The backlash shocks her hard, and that cost tells the truth of the scene. This thing is not just resisting them, it is punishing every overconfident move they make. Back in the present fight, the battle escalates into full chaos as the enemy starts throwing out named weapons and brutal special attacks with no interest in mercy. The Snorlax weapon, the Tentacle Strike, the Downward Water Assault, and the Upward Golden Blast all turn the sky into a slaughterhouse, and the result is a huge red-orange explosion that proves the conflict has jumped from a local skirmish to a city-level magical disaster. The smoke clears just enough for Lin to see this fight has turned into a hunt, not a brawl. While one side keeps piling on the chaos, another man breaks down the real trap in plain terms. Hianhui has hypnotized people and is trying to kidnap them, but the Phoenix group is still holding the line, which means nobody gets a clean escape route yet. Back in the same battlefield, the enemy starts tightening the net around Lin's side with ugly little ambushes and personal pressure. A red-haired woman, Han Xinyi, shows up just long enough to spit out that someone important has arrived, and then another woman recognizes Lin directly, which tells everyone this is no random raid anymore. The moment turns nasty fast because Lin is already being dragged into a confrontation that knows his name, and that usually means the enemy came prepared. Then the battle stops pretending to be local. The landscape gets hit with destructive force on a scale that makes survival the only conversation that matters, and the entity flat out says none of them are leaving alive. That is the point where the city fight becomes a massacre in progress, because now the enemy is not trying to win cleanly, it is trying to seal the whole area and grind everyone inside it down. Under that pressure, Zhao Yutang and the others try to break out through brute force, but the formation keeps stripping their power and throws them back to the ground. Zhao Yutang still forces herself forward with coordinated strikes, which proves she is not folding even when the battlefield itself is cheating against her. The catch is obvious: courage is not enough if the formation is eating their strength before the hits can matter. The enemy then escalates from raw force to grotesque control, and the dead start getting pulled back into the fight. One ally catches the danger immediately, because once corpses rise, this stops being a duel and turns into a battlefield that keeps refilling itself. That is the real threat now, and it means Zhao Yutang's side has to survive not just the enemy in front of them, but the whole field around them. As the pressure peaks, the women on Lin's side keep throwing everything they have into the enemy's face, even when the counterforce is still pushing them back. Zhao Yutang keeps attacking despite the formation bleeding her power dry, and the old woman finally commits to a wider response by taking control of the poisonous gas and ordering the blood puppets cleared out. So the battle shifts from panic to triage. They are no longer trying to win beautifully, only to stop the enemy from turning the whole city block into a slaughter pen. The first thing the enemy admits is ugly and useful. Some of the poisoned classmates are already beyond saving, so this battle is no longer about clean rescue. That brutal truth gives Zhao Yutang one job now, and she takes it the only way she can, by throwing herself back into the fight instead of letting the field swallow everyone whole. Back in the heart of the clash, Zhao Yutang and her ally force the undead side to spend more and more just to stay standing. It is not pretty, but it matters, because every burst of pressure buys the wounded a few more seconds to breathe, and that is the difference between a disaster and a massacre. Elsewhere in the reign, the fight widens from survival into recognition and betrayal, because someone important has finally been found in the middle of the chaos. Zhao Yutang sees a familiar face, realizes the battlefield has dragged in even more power, and that shock makes her hesitate at exactly the wrong time. That hesitation nearly costs her everything, because the enemy stops playing defense and goes straight for the throat. Zhao Hongling steps in with the confidence of someone who expects obedience from the whole field, and the battle turns into a public warning. Anyone who came here to help is now also a target. The counterattack grows so violent that the battlefield starts eating its own structures, which tells everyone this is no longer a skirmish but a city-level wrecking job. By the time the strikes tear through the grave-like pillars and monuments, the point is clear: the enemy is not just trying to win, she is trying to erase the ground under Zhao Yutang's side. Back in the wounded aftermath, Han Xinyi forces emergency medicine into the hands of the injured, because now the next threat is collapse, not just combat. Zhao Yutang's people are trying to keep the surviving team members upright long enough to matter again, and that rescue becomes the only real victory on the board for the moment. Then the scene snaps from triage back into confrontation, with Zhao Yutang's grandmother taking command and deciding the missing Lin matters more than panic. She rejects delay, orders Zhao Yutang pulled out for treatment, and commits the whole group to chasing the larger spiritual prize instead, which means the next phase is not healing first, but escalation first. Lin is staring at a threat that has finally stopped being abstract. The heavenly demon sect is strong enough to wipe people out if nobody stops it, and that realization hits like a kick to the ribs. Purple demonic power closes in around him, so he throws himself into the air just to avoid getting swallowed whole. He gets forced backward through the fight, which tells you the problem right away. This is not a clean win, it is survival, while he hunts for the real weakness in the chaos. The purple demon below keeps pressing, and Lin only buys a second of breathing room when he crashes down onto the platform in a flash of white smoke and reset for now despair. Then the demon finally shows its true face, and the ugly part matters more than the spectacle. This thing is not just a loose spirit, it is a possession-level parasite, with enough ki to make everyone around it panic. The threat is no longer defeat the enemy, it is identify what is driving it before it eats the whole field. A woman on the field screams for her lady, then charges straight at the demon anyway, because once people are cornered, loyalty gets louder than fear. She manages to strike it back, which proves the creature is still physical enough to be hurt, but also close enough to snap the whole situation shut if nobody finds the hidden fragment fast. Now the story shifts to the calmer but nastier kind of danger, the kind that smiles. A red-eyed woman confronts the question head-on and gets called the devil who teamed up with Hian Hui, and her answer lands like a confession with manners. The heavenly demon sect does not just fight, it cultivates magic and grows power like a disease nobody invited. She is not pretending to be helpless either. She stands there bold enough to mock the men around her, then confirms that obedience is being bought and rented by the second, which means Lin is dealing with a cult system, not a lone enemy, and that is much harder to punch through. Back in the present, the battered survivor thanks the other side for saving her life, and the gratitude turns into something more dangerous. She offers herself as a servant. That is how bad the pressure is now, when surviving one encounter immediately turns into bargaining over who gets control next. She then explains the actual scheme, and this is the part Lin needs to remember if he wants any chance of winning later. Hian Hui is being used as a host to absorb yang power so the demon can recover. The hiding place is the Western Honsi district. The recovery window is short, and the enemy is already counting on Hian Hui being easy to steer because she is supposed to be compromised from the inside. That warning turns into the real mission. The fragment is not talking to the others, but the speaker can still sense its breath near a farm, which means these demon sword pieces are scattered and independent, and one emperor-level power source is crushing everything around them before it can fully wake up. So the target becomes clear: destroy the emperor completely this time, soul and all. Lin stops treating this as a messy chase and goes straight into the one thing that can still flip the board, activating the sword secret technique and committing to a ceiling-style counterattack that has to land or everything keeps spiraling. The fight turns feral from there, with Lin driving forward through speed, rhythm, and raw pressure, while the enemy keeps trying to outplay him at range. He even laughs through it, because at this point the only way to stay alive is to act like the whole exchange is under control, which it absolutely is not. Then Lin starts stacking the technique into bigger shapes. First a vertical cut, then a spinning wheel of force, then a low strike that keeps the opponent from settling. The point is not flash, it is containment. He is trying to box in something that was never meant to be handled by normal hand, and the margin for error is basically non-existent. The opponent still talks like he owns the field, taunting Lin about those flying swords. And that smugness matters because it tells you he thinks the pressure is still in his favor. Lin answers by escalating instead of retreating, hurling more power forward, and even revealing a small cyan gift in his hands, which means the next phase is not escape anymore, but a trap being set in plain sight. Back in the present, Lin has pushed this fight to the edge of a sealing ritual, and now the only question is whether he can lock the thing down before its power breaks loose. The opponent keeps sneering that Lin is holding a lost technique together by force, which matters because it means this is no clean win, just a brutal gamble with the whole field hanging on it. Lin stops playing defense and answers with a hard counter, because if he lets the serpent keep its rhythm, he gets buried under it. The clash turns ugly fast. The serpent takes the hit, still keeps coming, and Lin's side of the exchange starts looking less like a duel and more like containment against a nightmare with teeth. Then the pressure finally cracks something deeper, and a spirit-like force rises up over Lin, as if the fight has dragged his hidden power into the open. He comes out changed, eyes burning red, and that is the point where the struggle stops being just about surviving one attack and starts becoming proof that his old life is bleeding into this one. Now in the rain, Lin draws on a sword that is clearly not normal, and the broken state of it tells you somebody already abused it before he ever got his hands on it. He and the Watcher both realize the same ugly truth at once. This weapon has been damaged enough to make control difficult, which is exactly why it can still matter in the wrong hands. That realization pushes the fight wider, because Lin is no longer facing one enemy in one place. He is staring down a threat that has swollen into something bigger and uglier. He calls the other man a scoundrel, then commits to a sealing technique that is not meant to look stylish, only to bury evil under layers until it can stop moving. Nice of the ancient cultivators to leave behind a spell that sounds like it was named by a very tired accountant. Lin keeps driving the seal forward even as the target resists, because this is the kind of moment where hesitation gets everyone swallowed. He invokes the Red Lotus seal, Evil Sky, then pushes for the final lock, but the resistance surges back hard enough to tell him this thing is still not fully cornered. The seal reaches its limit and blows open in a white burst, which proves Lin has power but not yet perfect control over the whole process. Off to the side, Zhao Hongling's name enters the conversation as the supposed top fighter in the Phoenix group, but the real point is harsher. People keep throwing around rankings while Lin is standing in the middle of an actual war, and that gap between reputation and reality is getting wider by the second. Han Shenyi finally stops pretending this is a normal fight and admits the truth. If she decides a struggle is over, she expects the whole world to agree with her. That arrogance hangs in the air a second too long, because Lin is still standing, which means she has not actually finished him yet. Back in the presence of the battle, Han Shenyi's power starts slipping out from under her control, and her red eyes give away the real problem fast enough for anyone paying attention to notice. She did not come here just to win a personal grudge though, because she wanted Zhao Yutang as bait to expose whatever hidden scheme is moving behind the curtain. Nice plan, extremely rude execution. Then Han Shenyi stops circling and tries to flush out the hidden opponent directly, but that only raises the stakes. She starts talking like the whole cage belongs to her, and that's the danger. Once she turns this into a public threat, everyone inside becomes collateral. Because the conflict keeps escalating, the disaster spills past the private fight and hits the city itself. Above Shenyang City's Hunxi district, a massive opening tears in the sky. A force comes down from it, and the people below realize this is no longer school drama or faction posturing, but a supernatural event big enough to shake the entire district. Even the random street-level chaos cannot hide how serious this is. One person is trying to steal a phone, while everyone else is busy staring upward at the impossible light. And the thing inside it? The signal dies, the recording starts, and now the whole city has a witness before it even understands what it is witnessing. High above Hunxi district, the fight stops looking like a private grudge and starts looking like a disaster. Song Yunxi, the gamer who realizes the blast is happening near Lin's house, goes cold because this is no longer about stolen accounts or school trash talk. It means the chaos has reached ordinary people, and now everyone in the city has a front row seat whether they want one or not. Inside the city, Han Shenyi, the red-haired rival who never knows when to quit, gets the same bad news at the same time. She spots the scale of the destruction, and that shock tells you the real problem. Whatever is happening overhead has already slipped past anything she can handle with brute force or attitude. The city is now a battlefield, and she is watching it open up in real time. In the sky over Hunxi district, the dark-haired demon woman starts talking like she owns the place, and that confidence is the first clue that this is a power struggle, not just random destruction. She mocks her opponent for lacking the holy sword and drives the attack harder, while the defender is forced to answer with everything she has just to stop the city from getting flattened. Back on the ground, the damage is already everywhere. Fallen bodies, shattered streets, and the spread of the attack make one thing obvious. The demon's goal is not victory in a clean duel. It is domination through panic, and the cost is being paid by everyone below. Then the blonde fighter finally says what the whole situation has been building toward. The enemy should have dodged, and she did not. That complaint matters because it proves the demon's defense is uglier than it looks. The kind that can absorb punishment and force a longer war instead of a quick finish. Good, now the fight has a real problem to solve, which is exactly the sort of thing Lin's enemies never enjoy. The demon answers by bonding with the red dragon above the burning city, and the threat escalates from an attack into a living siege. It spits out that even mentioning the shell is forbidden, then rains down more destruction, which means the defenders are not fighting one opponent, but a dragon built to keep coming until something breaks. Now the battle turns on whether the cracked defense can be exploited. The blonde fighter taunts the dark-haired woman for finally being exposed and wants to see what comes next. But the dark-haired woman is not panicking, because she is still holding back the answer to this entire mess. That answer is a sword technique strong enough to make even the creature take notice. For the first time in this whole mess, the hidden side of the fight starts to show itself, and the creature's reaction tells you the same thing Lin has been proving all along. The people who look cornered in this world are sometimes the ones sitting on the deadliest power. Lin spots the trick in time and calls out the setup for what it is. Someone uses a paper doll on the girl's gun to steal a window of control. That matters because this fight is no longer just brute force. It is a dirty little race of timing, bait, and whoever blinks first gets fed to the fire. Back in the same battle, Lin stops pretending this is a normal exchange and goes straight to his trump card, the sacred law of refinement of heavenly fire. He throws everything into it, and when the hit lands, it proves the hidden threat was real all along, because the opponent survives long enough to answer with a counter barrage instead of folding like he should have. That is the danger now. The city is watching a power scale nobody planned for. The pressure keeps climbing as the light-haired fighter crushes the dark opponent up close, then admits the ugly truth out loud. The technique finally arrives, but it is slower than the sword. That tells Lin the enemy is reading the fight correctly, which means every delay from here on costs blood and bragging rights both. Above the chaos, the aircraft turns the city fight into a siege, hosing the target down while the antagonist talks straight to Emperor like he is already solving the numbers in his head. Emperor answers with red force and mocks the incoming shot as too slow because the real contest is no longer who can hit hardest, but who can survive the sky long enough to keep shooting. While the bombardment still echoes, the forge thread finally pays off. The female fighter reports that the forge is complete, but the last step still has to happen, and that leaves her exhausted and one bad interruption away from disaster. That beat matters because it turns the whole battle into a race against collapse, not just an exchange of techniques. Then the scene widens again and the city gets its real nightmare. The creature rises, orders everyone to run, and starts tearing through the streets with raw destructive force, which means this is no longer a duel the heroes can manage casually. It is a public emergency with civilians in the blast radius. The woman with the sword makes the stakes personal. She warns that interfering in her fight is exactly what causes this kind of damage, and her subordinate pushes her to use the creature as a moving pool of spiritual energy to corner Emperor. So now the battle has split in two, with one side trying to contain the monster and the other trying to weaponize it before the city pays the bill. A terrified child is still screaming for his father in the wreckage, and the whole point of the chaos is ugly and simple now. The city cannot protect anyone if this fight keeps spiraling. While the adults lose control, the child keeps getting dragged back into the danger, which makes the destruction feel personal instead of abstract. Back in the streets, the father realizes the normal world is gone the moment his signal dies, and the sky starts acting wrong. He spots the anomaly, panics, and that panic tells you everything you need to know. Whatever is moving above them is bigger than a local fight, and his family is now standing under it. The hidden power behind the disaster finally shows itself, and it is not trying to scare one opponent anymore. It is trying to dominate the entire city. One side keeps hammering the battlefield with raw force, while the other answers with a more controlled, crushing attack. So the real question becomes which power can outlast the other before the streets collapse under the strain. That pressure snaps the family thread wide open when the father sees his daughter rushing straight toward the fight and screams for her to stop. Song Yunshi, a reckless daughter who thinks she can sprint into disaster and fix it with grit, refuses to back down and climbs into the storm anyway, which means this battle now costs blood and family on top of property damage. Back in the storm, the man in the golden sword finally faces the woman he has been circling for too long, and both of them admit this has been building across more than one lifetime. Their words make the real fight clear. He wants closure, she wants to finish the matter fast, and neither of them is here to play nice with sentiment. Then the demonic face-off begins in earnest, and the scale jumps from personal grudge to supernatural disaster. The woman calls down a demonic domain, while the other side answers with divine force, and the clash proves the city is now standing under two powers that want to overwrite everything below them. The woman with red eyes keeps pressing the advantage, and this is where the fight turns from spectacle into judgment. If the opponent now carries a sword, there is no hiding behind excuses anymore. She locks into the duel with the kind of resolve that says she has waited long enough for this rematch, and the power building around her makes it clear she is done waiting for anyone to choose the moment for her. The woman pushes the hidden fight into the open by drawing on divine power, and that tells everyone the same thing. Lin is no longer dealing with a petty rival, but with someone who can threaten the whole city. The opponent recognizes the old forbidden sword ritual, which means this rematch is built on a grudge that has been waiting to pay out in blood. Then the scale snaps wider. A golden phoenix and a black-red sword force the battle into a judgment over the city itself, and the huge cosmic presence dropping toward the streets makes the stakes impossible to dodge, even for the people pretending this is still a private score. The white-haired fighter, the one calling the shots from above, declares the winner already decided, and that is exactly when the demon realizes the trap has closed around her. The other half of the magic sword appears, and suddenly the thing she has been hoarding, hiding, and counting on is no longer enough. She tries to laugh it off, but the panic leaks out fast because the real problem is not damage. It is that her enemy has completed the weapon she could not. With the demon rattled, the fight turns from boasting to survival. She starts demanding answers and swinging through the confusion, but that only buys time for the next attacker to step in and force the issue with a direct challenge to the Empress of Demons. The Demon Empress gets shoved back and pinned in place, which is humiliating enough that she has to beg to be put down. Her own words make the situation uglier, because being rescued by this side feels to her like another kind of betrayal, and the attacker shuts that sentiment down to keep her alive long enough for the plan to work. Lin's side is not here for a noble speech. They are here to survive the mess and make the demon talk. Back on the demon's end, the whispering turns out to matter, so the attacker cuts across it and forces the truth into the open. The dark figure explains that this prison of light can only be broken with yang power, then twists the knife by revealing that the demon has weakened himself to fit this world, stripping away his own strength to stay alive. That accusation lands hard because it turns the demon's power into a flaw. The demon answers with a full attack, but the next blow back is worse. The fight exposes that the sword fragments all connect to one body now, and Lin makes the connection aloud. In other words, the demon has been carrying the missing piece without even knowing it, and that means his own hoarded strength is the thing slipping out of him. He tries to claw the energy back, but the more he struggles, the more his body betrays how badly this setup has already broken him. The demon thinks he has the situation back in his hands, but that confidence lasts about as long as it takes for the beast of chaos to show up and make the whole battlefield look fragile. He recognizes the thing as a gift from above, then immediately tries to wave it off like it is someone else's problem, which is a bold move for a guy already losing pieces of himself. 1372, 1373, 1374, 1375. Back at the rift, the white-haired planner is still treating this disaster like a chore list, and the demon-horned figure asks for the next step because the plan clearly is not finished. The answer lands cold. The real objective is to repair the skies, and the white-haired figure is willing to do it alone, which tells everyone this is bigger than a grudge match and nastier than a simple escape. 1376, 1377, 1378, 1379. Outside the city now, the armored demon drops in over the rooftops while the female fighter looks up and reminds him of the promise hanging over all this chaos. He answers by calling down 1,000 heavenly planes and forcing the fight back across the dimensional barrier, because winning here means more than beating one enemy. It means deciding who gets to cross worlds and who gets thrown back. 1380, 1381, 1382, 1383. Inside the cosmic rift, the falling fighter realizes the cost of this stunt is real. He is running out of chi and the void does not care. He pulls back from the brink, refuses to keep pushing alone, and then the Emperor hauls him up just before the closing tear swallows them both. So now survival depends on trusting someone else for once. 1384, 1385, 1386, 1387, 1388. As they move through the collapsing rift, the demon lays out the ugly logic of the venerable demon. They practice the Tao of killing, and the more they kill, the stronger they are supposed to become. That matters because it explains the gap in power and why Lin has become such an insult to the people hunting him. But the demon also admits the old rules are breaking down around this fight. 1389, 1391. The closing rift turns into a panic test, with the fighter yelling for the demon to get back before the exit seals shut and asking why he is just standing there. Then the accusation cuts deeper than the closing door. He saved a child he knew would be revived anyway, and that choice exposes that this mess is not only about power, it is about what kind of person survives inside it. 1392, 1393, 1394, 1395, 1396. Back in the battle, Lin gets hit mid-air, which is the price of standing at the center of everybody else's scheme instead of getting out clean. The demon snarls in frustration while Lin answers with his own spell work, and the clash stops being about raw force and starts becoming a fight over who can still hold their footing when the world tears open around them. 1397, 1398, 1399, 1401. The next beat is all fallout. Two faces lock in a stare, and whatever they see in each other is enough to make the whole battle feel personal instead of tactical. Lin then drops into a coughing collapse, the strain finally catching him, and the scene makes it plain that surviving this round is not the same thing as coming out intact. 1402, 1403, 1404, 1405. When the noise finally thins out, Lin stands with his eyes closed and his face calm, which usually means he has either found the answer or decided to pretend he has. He ends the stretch standing in sunset light with a hand on his chest, and that quiet posture says the real victory here is not the blast or the rift, but the fact that he is still choosing his own path. 1407, 1408. A warrior decides the woman in front of him is a spy for the immortals who slaughtered his people, so this stops being a conversation and becomes an execution. The demon woman wants it finished fast, but the captive still tries to speak, and that hesitation is all the opening the other side needs to crush her down. Back in the same doomed exchange, the warrior twists the knife with words, calling kindness a weakness that gets everyone around you killed. When the woman reaches for answers and gets only more denial, she finally cracks and screams him down instead of listening to one more second of it. Later, the fallout gets named for what it really is. A catastrophe where a whole city nearly gets erased and the sky itself splits open from a single sword strike. Some unknown force drags the dead back from the edge, which means this is not just history for Lin, it is proof that the people around him are living in the middle of a very ugly miracle. Now in the debate that follows, Han Shinyi, a blunt rival who never bothers dressing up her distrust, says waiting to die is for fools, and that she would rather not trust a group of stinky fish and rotten shrimp. Yang Tianyu pushes back by asking what else anyone can do, and that question turns the room from panic into strategy. Still in the same discussion, Bai Yun, an elder tied to the ancient temple Great White Cloud clan, explains why this mess matters. Her clan guards oracles in the heavenly path, and the thing called the Tears of Heaven got sealed because it is too valuable to leave loose. That gives Lin the real warning underneath the lore, because anyone connected to that power is now standing in the middle of a political target list. Zhao Yutang, the strong-willed student who keeps showing up where trouble is, snaps at the room for wasting time and gets answered with the blunt claim that she is the Heaven's Daughter of Destiny, the group's trump card. The discussion immediately shifts from theory to use, because once people start talking about her as an asset, somebody is already deciding who gets to shape her future. That is where the ugly part lands for Lin. Restoring Zhao Yutang's power apparently requires a pure yang body for dual cultivation, which means the next move is not just training, it is partner selection. The beauty contest chatter and the talk of monitoring Phoenix Group make the whole thing sound polite on paper, but the real agenda is clear enough for Lin to feel the net tightening around him. Somewhere after that, the conversation turns inward, and one speaker admits the aura still has not recovered since the Great War, with the foundations damaged and the body too weak to support what comes next. Then a paper doll relays a fragment about high schools across the country. The verdict lands as a clean loss, and the whole discussion gets kicked down the road for later, because nobody in the room has solved the problem yet. Back in the present, Lin gets tracked down after being out all day, and the person confronting him wants an explanation now, not after another round of cultivation politics. That is the pressure point for him. While everyone else argues over destiny, partners, and old wars, he is still the one being cornered in the hallway and forced to answer for where he stands. Back in the Fallout debate, Lin gets handed the social equivalent of a school-wide ledger, a beauty contest ballot, with the adults and girls apparently deciding his value in public before he even gets a say. The joke is that everyone is treating it like a casual school event, but for Lin, it is a ranking system wrapped in heart icons, and he is already being sized up like a prize someone forgot to hide. In the classroom, the girls start sorting themselves by who they want beside them, and the talk turns shameless fast. Han Xinyi, the red-haired rival who never met a competition she wouldn't try to win, gets dragged into the joke about sleeping with Lin, which tells him something important. Even the teasing here is a form of public pressure, and nobody is pretending his presence is normal anymore. That chatter then swings to Chen Letian, the male classmate people are openly fawning over, and the hallway turns into a tiny parade for him. In other words, Lin is not just dealing with one awkward spotlight, he is watching the school's whole social machine sort men into favorites, and that makes his own climb look a lot less random. Meanwhile, Zhao Yutang, the strong-willed student who keeps pushing toward Lin, gets approached with homemade cookies and a neat little seduction attempt. She shuts it down cold, and when the blonde girl's strange voice does not work on her, the scene exposes a bigger problem for Lin's world. Some people are trying to win affection with hidden tricks, not honesty, and Zhao Yutang is one of the few who can refuse the script. Back in the cafe, Zhao Yutang spots Lin and loses the ability to keep this moment small, because now the whole room can feel the tension between them. She wants to say what they are to each other, but the words stick, and that hesitation matters more than the label itself. For Lin, the relationship is still undefined, which means every outsider gets to project their own story onto him. Because that social mess stays unresolved, the story shifts from gossip to proof, and Lin is suddenly moving through the city with Zhao Yutang close enough that people can read something into it. The public side of his life is no longer just ridicule or curiosity. It is becoming a visible partnership of some kind, which is exactly the sort of thing that makes enemies, admirers, and trouble all show up at once. Then the tone snaps hard, because Zhao Yutang is thrown into a brutal fight, and the injuries on her clothes tell you this is no friendly sparring match. She is blaming herself for lying to someone who trusted her, which means the battle is not just physical anymore. It is dragging her guilt into the open and turning the cost of broken trust into something she has to pay in blood and effort. That pressure sends Zhao Yutang into training mode, and she attacks the punching bag like she is trying to punish her own excuses out of existence. The trainer, Hei Yun-hei, clocking that she is rich and stubborn but still not built for real resistance yet, immediately turns the lesson into a threat, because in this world, strength is never just encouragement, it is also who gets to push you around. The exchange ends the only way it could. Zhao Yutang gets blasted out from the first floor, and everyone nearby reacts like they have just watched a bad idea turn into a flying lesson. That is the real fallout here, since her stubbornness finally meets a wall, and Lin's orbit keeps pulling in people who cannot afford to stay weak for long. Zhao Yutang watches the fall in real time, and realizes this started as a strange request, not a random street brawl. That matters because the blonde who just sent a trainer flying is already turning her own humiliation into leverage, and everyone around her is about to get sorted by who can keep up. The trainer collapses from swagger to begging in about 3 seconds, which is usually a bad sign for a man's career. Zhao Yutang sees the mask come off and learns the scar was never the real trick, since he is hiding weakness with theater and getting punished for it anyway. The blonde keeps pressing until the trainer starts talking like a cornered criminal, which forces the truth into the open. This was never a fair match. It was an arrest with extra attitude. Then the police arrive, hand over the reward, and turn her brutality into a public win, because in this world getting violent only becomes a problem if you do not get paid for it. Zhao Yutang now has the annoying answer nobody wanted, so the officer asks the obvious question, how did she beat him and did she train for it? That question matters because the blonde's skill is no longer private, and once people start measuring her, they also start measuring who she is chasing. Later, the social game tightens around Lin because the blonde is not just chasing strength anymore, she is chasing access to him. Her plan is simple enough to be dangerous. If luck is real, she wants to ride it straight toward Lin, and that is exactly the sort of logic that causes trouble in a world full of women who treat desire like strategy. At the pastry shop, Han Xinyi, a red-haired rival who never sounds like she is asking politely, greets the blonde as an old friend and immediately starts squeezing her for information about Lin. The exchange turns ugly fast because Han Xinyi is not here for sweets, she is here for leverage, and the blonde is one answer away from dragging Lin deeper into the mess. Han Xinyi draws a line and makes it plain that she is not backing off now, which means this is no longer idle gossip, but a commitment. Then the blonde spots the girl in question and starts digging again, because Lin's name keeps attracting attention even when he is not in the room. A black-haired girl finally snaps and accuses the blonde of caring more about a stupid game than her friend's life, and the blonde is left blinking like she just got hit with a chair made of common sense. That clash matters because it shows the real cost of Lin's orbit. Everyone around him is being pulled into a competition they did not agree to join. Elsewhere, the story slips into a memory of girls by a big window overlooking the city, then up to a rooftop where a challenge starts before anyone even throws a punch. The setting shift matters because this is where the relationship war turns physical, and Lin is no longer dealing with simple teasing, he is standing in weather and trouble at the same time. On the rooftop in the rain, Lin faces a woman who keeps pushing him into a corner, while he answers like a man who already knows how one-sided this can get. He fears being trapped by her pace and her confidence, so she cuts the tension by offering her coat instead of another cheap advantage, which is almost more unsettling than the threat was. Then the mood flips again as she openly shows power and dares him to stop hiding behind excuses, because she wants the contest honest even if it hurts. Lin tries to brush it off and talk about the rain, but that only drags the fight back to what it really is: pride, pressure, and a refusal to look weak in front of each other. Lin shuts the training down and sends He Yanhui home, which tells her this was never just idle flirting to him, but she catches the hint of a game in his tone, so the tension doesn't die, it just changes shape and starts circling the rooftop like it owns the place. Under that standoff, He Yanhui flashes back to the rare kind of man who actually joined her in what she liked, and that memory explains why Lin's refusal hits harder than any insult. She is not just chasing attention, she is comparing him to someone who once met her halfway, and Lin already knows that standard is dangerous. Back in the present, the scene shifts inside as Chen Shushu, Lin's servant, checks whether her master is alright, and gets straight to the point about the dark door. Lin wants the practical version, so she explains that the compasses lead to yin energy and that the demon sword won't stay a mystery forever, which means his next step is real cultivation, not more talking. Lin immediately uses that momentum to issue orders: hide the cultivation materials at home until the wall is repaired, then get moving. It is a small domestic command on the surface, but it shows he is already thinking like someone who plans to keep power and scandal out of the same room. Meanwhile, Zhao Yutang arrives downstairs looking for Lin, but the household keeps slipping out of reach before she can corner him. She keeps trying to turn a simple visit into an apology, yet every interruption makes it clearer that this relationship is now running on nerves, timing, and bad luck with doors. Then Lin comes back in shirtless and still half in recovery mode, and Zhao Yutang nearly loses the ability to act normal around him. The moment gets embarrassingly intimate fast because she wanted to apologize, not get caught in the middle of whatever this is between a bruised ego and a very inconvenient body. Zhao Yutang backs up just enough to insist it is too early, then says tomorrow as if she can postpone the whole problem with one word. Lin answers by pushing the interaction into training instead of romance, and the awkwardness turns into the kind of physical closeness that makes denial harder, not easier. Lin finally apologizes for not protecting her last time, and that lands because it admits the gap between his old weakness and the man he is trying to become. Zhao Yutang softens, brings gifts as a peace offering, then makes the real condition plain: fix the wall and she will let the incident go, which is a very polite way of saying she still expects him to prove himself. Later that night, Zhao Yutang is left alone in the doorway, and the bravado drains out of her. She sits with the apology she almost made, remembers the faces and moments that keep getting tangled around Lin, and it turns the whole rivalry into something more personal than simple teasing. Back with Lin, the damaged wall is now the blunt reminder that his life keeps breaking through the places meant to keep people separate. When he looks through the hole and sees Zhao Yutang inside, the relationship war comes into focus. He cannot keep her at a distance, and she is no longer pretending she wants distance anyway. Lin has finally broken through the first wall of this reverse world, but the real problem now is personal. Zhao Yutang is no longer acting like a nuisance from class, and Lin has to decide whether to shut her out or let this get messy. In the middle of all that, he makes the decision that changes the temperature of the room completely, because once he stops treating her like a threat, the rivalry starts turning into something closer to a confession. Zhao Yutang hears what Lin is really saying, which is that he is not interested in forcing anything while she is still hurt, and that knocks the arrogance right out of her. Instead of backing off, she pushes harder and makes it plain that she does not want a casual game. She wants a place beside him, even if she has to fight for the right to stand there. That is the turn. This is no longer teasing, it is her staking a claim and daring him to answer it. Back in the same room, Lin stops pretending he can control the distance between them, and Zhao Yutang answers by making her own terms of attachment sound almost absurdly sincere. He gives her room to choose for herself. She accepts the permission as a victory, and then she seals it by dragging the whole thing back into ordinary life, with a promise to go home and come with her tomorrow for the photo shoot. That is the softest kind of surrender, which is still a surrender. Later, the story jumps forward to a dinner gathering, and the mood shifts fast because this is no longer about private feelings. It is about status, family pressure, and who gets to sit close to Lin in public. New people start reading him from his photos, which means his face is already becoming a social weapon before he even says a word. At the table, people stop being polite and start testing boundaries. The blonde woman, Zhao Yutang, refuses the whole ritual of introductions because she wants the food and the fight, while other women immediately size up Lin like he is either a prize or a problem waiting to happen. One woman even pushes a private conversation, and suddenly the meal turns into a contest over who gets access to him first. Then the tea starts doing what tea in these stories always does, which is hide a knife under good manners. One woman offers Lin a cup, another name drops the rare Baiyun golden silk tea, and the room instantly splits into suspicion because everybody understands that this is not just hospitality, it is a test with hidden rules. Small detail, huge headache. Nobody brings premium tea to a table like this unless they want something. Zhao Yutang catches the danger first and calls out the setup before Lin can drink it because she has already decided that nobody gets to trap him through a sweet-smelling cup. The accusation immediately turns into a social fight over innocence, ownership, and who is trying to use whom. And then Zhao Yutang goes straight for the throat by demanding the other woman lend her Lin for a couple of days. That is the moment the dinner stops being a dinner and becomes a status war with porcelain on the table. At the table, Zhao Yutang keeps pressing the pressure point she opened earlier because this whole dinner is really about who gets to control Lin. The woman across from her still tries to smile through it, but the air is already poisoned and Lin can feel that one wrong sip could turn a social trap into a real one. Lin handles it the only way he can. He stays calm, holds his chopsticks, and refuses to look rattled while everyone waits for him to either obey or embarrass somebody. That restraint matters, because in this world, a man who cannot even survive a tea invitation is never going to survive the bigger games around him. Then the older woman cuts through the tension and throws out a new bait, saying she brought a treasure to show them. The treasure turns out to be a rat, which is a ridiculous thing to call dramatic until she explains it is a yang energy-seeking rat, the sort of creature that hunts for bodies with the right cultivation potential. Zhao Yutang immediately connects the dots and realizes this is not random luck, but a test for someone with a body worth noticing. Lin comes from a family with no immortal practitioners for 18 generations, so the room is suddenly forced to confront the possibility that he is hiding something far stranger than his lazy first impression. The rat proves the point by going after Lin instead of the food, and he reacts like a man who has no interest in being judged by a small furry oracle. He batters it around with total confidence, which is funny right up until everyone at the table realizes the creature is answering to him as if his body is exactly what it came looking for. That seals the social side of the scene. Lin does not want the scrutiny, the guests do not know what to make of him, and the meal is over for him even if the dishes are still there. He gets up to leave because staying longer would only mean more probing, more possession games, and more people acting like he is a prize instead of a person. Only then does the older woman reveal the real meaning of the rat and the ugly little miracle it confirmed. A pure yang body is a legendary cultivation gift, and the warning that follows is simple. Nobody outside this room can hear about it, because a secret like that does not stay private unless everyone in the room is willing to fight for it. That secrecy becomes the bridge into the next threat, because the moment Lin's value is exposed, the hidden world starts moving around him again. In the new brighter space, figures descend into conflict, and the old supernatural pressure returns, which means this dinner was never just about tea at all. Now the supernatural fight snaps back into focus. A masked man runs straight into a battle he cannot control, and the force opposing him is already ahead of him in speed and power. He tries to keep up, but the clash only proves that someone on the other side is treating him like a problem to be pinned, not a rival to be respected. The masked man checks whether the woman is hurt, and the answer is that she is fine for now, which tells you he is already in protect mode instead of winning mode. Then the mood snaps sideways into something almost ridiculous, because one of them tries to turn a supernatural mess into a snowball fight like that is a normal way to spend a crisis. Back in the height of the city, the hidden enemy toys with him from above and demands that he stay all day, which is just villain talk for I control the pace here. The woman pushes back with the plain truth. Ordinary people can rest, but cultivators do not get that luxury when demons are still circling. She makes the choice to keep fighting instead of taking the easy out, and that matters because this is no longer about comfort. It is about duty under pressure. When she asks how long it will take to reach immortality and live with the heavens, she is really asking whether Lin can ever give her a future that does not keep getting interrupted by violence. While the personal talk is still hanging in the air, the real war crashes back in. The demon strategy is simple and ugly. Use the chaos, flood the area with force, and turn every distraction into an opening, because this fight is now about who can keep their head while the whole place burns. A dark-haired woman steps in as the defender, and the demon immediately makes the matchup clear by mocking the immortal world for sending a novice instead of someone stronger. She answers by pressing the attack and daring him to see whether his brothers arrive first or he dies first, which is the kind of sentence that usually means somebody has stopped planning to retreat. The exchange turns brutal in an instant, and the demon finally gets what he wanted. The room falls apart around the fighters, and someone is struck hard enough to make the others panic. The cost shows up immediately, because once the attention splits, the demon reveals he has been setting a trap the whole time, and Ying is the one paying for it. The demon has Ying on the ropes, and he knows it. He leans into the kill because the whole point of this ambush is simple. Break the defenders before help can arrive, then let the chaos do the rest. Then the fight gets interrupted by a bigger problem for the demons, because Venerable Demon's rules just got broken. Venerable Demon appears through a portal and immediately treats the unauthorized move like a liability, which tells everyone this attack was never clean or fully approved. Ying finally understands what he is really facing, and that recognition matters more than the wound now. This is not some random enemy attack. It is Venerable Demon's network reaching into the fight, which means the war has already widened beyond the room. Back in the burning building, Moto hits his limit and stops pretending this can still be managed politely. His apology lands because he is looking at the damage his side has caused, and the fire around them makes the cost impossible to dodge. The argument now turns into a family-sized disaster, because the mother or father on the other side has decided the demonic sword is too dangerous to keep sheltering. The accusation is brutal. Every time it is protected, people die. So the question is no longer loyalty, but whether restraint has already become complicity. The daughter pushes back instead of swallowing that logic, because she will not call slaughter strength just because an adult says so. Her answer is plain. If the blade only kills the helpless, then it is not power, it is banditry with better branding. After that clash, the story cools into a lonely aftermath with Ying out in the snow, battered and still trying to hold on. The warning about gray hair makes the cost personal, because this kind of practice is not just hard on the body, it is wearing the life out of him. A new figure steps into the snowy scene, first as a cold presence, and then against a warmer, firelit backdrop, which suggests this person belongs to the same trouble, but comes with a different angle on it. The shift matters because the story is now moving from open conflict into whatever truth this newcomer is carrying. Meanwhile, Wei Chin sits at a computer and stares at the screen like it just handed him bad news with a receipt attached. The tear and the whispered name show this is not abstract drama for him anymore. It has become a personal mess he cannot log out of. Then the accusation comes out clean. Everything is his fault, and Zhao Yutang is the one saying it. That puts the whole Han Shini problem on the table too, because this is no longer just about hurt feelings. It is about how one choice dragged several people into the same trap. Han Shini cuts through the argument and makes the stakes bigger than a game, which means Wei Chin cannot hide behind excuses anymore. When Han Shenyi tells Zhao Yutang to think twice, she is basically warning that the truth will not be comfortable, and Wei Chin is left sitting there, finally about to say what really happened. Han Shenyi does not let Wei Chin hide behind panic or excuses. She tells him he will find the answer, which is a polite way of saying this mess is his problem now, whether he likes it or not. Back in the schoolyard, the argument mutates into a petty turf war over Lin, with He Yutang trying to claim him and the blonde girl offering to play Go like she is not already walking into a fight. The whole thing is less romance and more ownership dispute, which is exactly why Lin gets sick of it and walks off, refusing to be treated like a prize by either side. Zhao Yutang calls him childish for leaving, then grabs the blonde girl's hand hard enough to make the point physically. She is done pretending this is casual. She says she likes Lin, everybody at school knows it, and she is tired of the blonde girl circling him like she has a claim. The shouting finally turns dangerous when the two girls push the fight beyond words. Zhao Yutang does not just defend Lin's name anymore, she forces the rivalry into the open, and that is the moment this stops being gossip and starts looking like a real conflict. Elsewhere, the aftermath keeps spreading. Lin hears enough to realize something is wrong with what happened to Zhao Yutang, so he rides out focused on the truth instead of the drama, while the blonde girl gets a warning that mercy is the only reason she is still standing there talking. That tension widens into team history when people start talking about the Yang family visitor, Yang Tianyu, the leader tied to an old conflict. The real issue is not just who showed up, but that someone in the room is already looking at the wrong thing, and the others can see it. In the present, Yang Tianyu and Zhao Yutang face off in a neon-lit city setting, and Yang Tianyu makes it clear she did not come here for small talk. She wants an answer about the day Zhao Yutang was with her, and when Zhao Yutang does not give it cleanly, Yang Tianyu leans in with the kind of threat that says memory is about to become a weapon. Then Yang Tianyu puts the old score on the table with a championship bracket. Flying Feather T1 beat Heaven's Door in the finals. So this is not random suspicion, but old defeat and old bitterness catching up at last. In other words, the romance mess is now welded to team history, and nobody in this circle gets to pretend the past stayed buried. Yang Tianyu stops pretending this is a debate and starts acting like the old score is personal. She throws the blame at Lin's side of the board, accusing her rival of envy, sabotage, and even Wei Chin's death, because for her, this is no longer about one fight, but about settling a humiliation that never healed. Yang Tianyu pushes harder, but the response is pure contempt. Instead of backing down, the other woman laughs in her face, and that ugly little laugh tells Yang everything she needs to know. Her anger is being treated like a joke, which is exactly the kind of insult that turns a private grudge into a public one. Back in the present, the argument widens into team history, because the real wound is not just jealousy, it's the old defeat at Flying Feather T1's hands. Zhao Yutong gets named as the person tied to that gaming team, and the people around her realize this was never random hostility, just a second chance for old bitterness to come back swinging. Zhao Yutong does not shrink from it. She calls the bluff, makes it clear she will not miss her second chance, and turns the whole mess from a rumor into a challenge that everyone in the room has to take seriously. That is when the rivalry stops being polite. Zhao Yutong dares the other side to fight, and the reply is just as sharp. There will be no retreat, no mercy, and no clean exit unless somebody backs off first. A third voice steps in to slow the blood down, because if this keeps escalating, the family support behind Zhao Yutong starts to matter more than the insult itself. The man tries to calm her and even leans on the Yutong family's backing, which makes the whole thing feel less like a personal spat and more like a faction about to lose its patience. Then the moment curdles completely. The other woman dismisses him, tells him to leave, and even flicks up a cigarette with that kind of attitude that says she has already decided who matters and who doesn't, which is a very expensive way to start a family war. Her real motive comes out after the noise. She is jealous of Zhao Yutong, but she hesitates to kill her because of the grandmother standing in the way. That restraint lasts exactly one breath, because once the anger wins, she openly decides Zhao Yutong has to die. Later at the restaurant, the conflict shifts from pride to ordinary life, which is where Lin usually gets ambushed by everyone else's expectations. The wrong order and the chef's shock over those refined ingredients make it clear that something unusual is happening around food here, but the important part is the same as always. Lin is still refusing to let other people decide what he owes them. Lin finally answers the pressure the only way he really can, with force. He hears Zhao Yutong call out to him, squares up, and when they pull against each other, the moment turns into a blunt statement that he is done being passive and done letting anyone drag him where they want. Zhao Yutong immediately takes control of the aftermath. She tells the others to clear the table and refuses to eat there, which leaves Lin's side stuck with the consequences of his own stubbornness. He keeps his independence, but every move he makes keeps throwing him back into women, rivalry, and public pressure. Lin shuts down the noise first, telling Zhao Yutong not to drag this out any further. She pushes back hard, because to her this is not nonsense at all, it is personal, and that only makes the tension uglier instead of softer. Then Lin gives in just enough to keep the peace, but not enough to surrender anything real. He and Zhao Yutong end up standing back to back in the hallway like two people pretending they are not in the middle of a very public fight, which means their bond is already turning into a contest over who gets to stand closest to him. That is when the jealousy gets spelled out in plain language. One girl blasts Zhao Yutong for acting domineering and stirring trouble, while the whole student body freezes around the giant pressure hanging over the room. Lin is no longer just dealing with personal stubbornness, he is becoming the prize other people argue over. Zhao Yutong answers like someone who has already chosen her side. She admits she caused pain when she settled things, then flat out says she will never hand Lin to anyone else, and she will not even surrender her Igo partner that easily either. The message is simple. Possession, loyalty, and rivalry are all bleeding together now, and nobody in this mess is planning to be reasonable. The confrontation tightens when Zhao Yutong tells Lin to wait and begs the other girl not to keep causing him trouble. But the dark-haired rival refuses to back off, and Zhao Yutong fires right back that she will never let her go, because this is no longer just about pride. It is about refusing to lose Lin to someone else's game. Zhao Yutong keeps the upper hand in the argument by claiming she can give Lin everything, while the other woman can barely offer one modest thing in return. So she answers with the one thing she actually can provide, a match of I Go, which is a painfully romantic flex when your competition is basically offering the entire world, and a smug expression. Then the scene pivots into a different kind of challenge, because the social fight starts turning into a public duel over Lin's attention. Zhao Yutong is left staring at the question that matters now. What can she really give him that makes her worth choosing? Back on that snowy rooftop, she settles on the bleakest possible answer, a cold place and a board game, which is not exactly a winning sales pitch. Then the mood snaps when she moves with force and a cat-like thing appears below, turning her romantic stubbornness into something that looks a lot more like a fight she is ready to win. Meanwhile, Lin gets a new opening through another girl entirely, since Han Xin-yi, a competitive rival who likes to test him where everyone can see it, calls him directly. He does not get long to answer before she cuts in and snaps that people should listen properly before hanging up, because apparently manners are still being audited in this world. The pressure then shifts again as the school gossip machine starts moving without him. Two girls run into each other in the stairwell, and one of them asks where Lin is, which tells you the real battleground is no longer private drama, but who can reach him first before everyone else does. The answer comes fast. Lin is out at the schoolyard playing basketball, so whoever wants him had better move now. That sets up the next round cleanly, because his new identity is no longer just being argued over in words, it is being tested in public where everyone can watch him pick a side. At the school court, Lin walks straight into a rivalry that has already outgrown private gossip. Zhao Yutong, the strong-willed student who keeps chasing him, is already in the middle of the action, and the whole place is turning into a public referendum on who gets to stand beside him. Lin and Zhao Yutong finally face each other, but she is still half treating this like a casual invitation, while he acts like he has no patience for being pulled around. Then she starts pressing him about why he did not come play with her, and the whole exchange makes the real tension obvious. This is not about basketball, it is about access to Lin. Instead of answering her directly, Lin cuts in and makes the court itself his reply. He shuts down her shot, which tells everyone watching that he is not here to be charmed into playing along. He is here to control the terms. Zhao Yutong laughs off the trick and turns it into a challenge, because one lucky basket is not enough to settle a rivalry this loud. She needles Lin as a bookish girl who only knows board games, and the insult lands exactly where it is meant to. If he wants her out of his business, he will have to beat her in public. Zhao Yutang raises the stakes into a clean wager, and now the game matters because the winner gets rights over Lin's time and attention. The crowd starts to notice a few boys rush over to watch, and one of them even bets on Zhao Yutang, which means this is no longer a private squabble but a spectacle with an audience. Zhao Yutang tries to slow the match down by pointing out that casual clothes are a bad sign, but the other girl answers with pure arrogance. She only changes for someone worth respecting. That insult is the real starting whistle, because now both sides have declared the other unworthy before the ball even moves. Now the fight shifts into a sports duel with rules and consequences, and Zhao Yutang makes the danger plain. If either of them leans on immortal powers, they get disqualified in front of everyone. The other girl brushes that off and calls her a novice, so Zhao Yutong answers with defiance and takes the ball first, ready to prove she is not just chasing Lin for fun. On the court, Zhao Yutong stops treating this like a casual match and starts playing to break the other girl's pride. The blonde girl answers with pure aggression, but Zhao Yutong meets her head on and makes it clear this is no longer about just getting the ball. It is about who gets to own the room. As the school crowds in around them, Zhao Yutong shows why she is dangerous in a fight that still has rules. She moves with speed and precision, and the blonde girl keeps getting forced to recover instead of dominate, which is the worst possible place to be when everyone is watching. Even the guy in the stands can probably feel his own knees tighten a little just looking at it. Zhao Yutong stops pretending this is a simple school game and turns it into a public warning. She raises the pressure, tells her rival to keep attacking, and makes it plain that if the blonde girl wanted a clean contest, she picked the wrong opponent to provoke. The blonde girl finally admits she misread her and decides to go serious, which is the first real sign she feels the match slipping. But Zhao Yutong keeps the tempo, and the moment the blonde girl tries to push forward again, she gets slapped back by a counter that leaves her airborne and scrambling to protect her dignity along with the ball. Back on the sideline, Lin's presence keeps dragging this rivalry into something bigger than basketball, because every point now feels like a vote for who gets close to him. The crowd can see the tension harden into a real contest, and the two girls are no longer just playing for a score, they are fighting for status in front of the whole school. The blonde girl refuses to fold, so Zhao Yutong keeps forcing the issue and turns each possession into a test of nerve. Every time the blonde girl thinks she has the opening, Zhao Yutong shuts it down, which proves she is not just chasing the game anymore, she is trying to settle the hierarchy right there on the court. The last stretch becomes a straight pursuit, and the blonde girl finally gets loud about taking the point, only for Zhao Yutong to erase the move and take control back. That swing is the whole story now. One girl keeps betting on confidence, the other keeps answering with cleaner, harsher proof. Zhao Yutong keeps pressing the point because she wants the whole school to see that she is the one controlling this matchup. The blonde girl fires back by refusing to back down, but Zhao Yutong answers with cleaner judgment and makes every attempt feel expensive. Back on the court, the argument turns into a full sprint for control, and the blonde girl finally tries to force Zhao Yutong aside. Zhao Yutong does not give her the lane, which means this is no longer about one possession. It is about who gets publicly crowned and who gets embarrassed in front of everyone. Then the truth lands hard. Zhao Yutong loses this round and she has to say it out loud. That matters more than the score, because the rivalry stops being noise and becomes a real hierarchy problem that the whole school can read in one glance. After the match, the damage is no longer just pride, because the injured girl wants to pretend she is fine while her friend drags her toward treatment. Lin hears the gossip spread fast, and now his name is tied to the fight whether he likes it or not. At the infirmary, the focus drops from social drama to raw physical cost. The healer pulls broken glass from the wound, says the leg needs real care, and keeps pushing because this girl is trying to act tough about an injury that is clearly not a joke. Back with Lin, the fallout turns awkward in the most human way possible, because now somebody needs privacy and somebody else is acting like curtains are a battlefield strategy. He is still being pulled into the mess around Han Xingyi, which means even the quiet moments keep getting contaminated by everyone else's feelings. Lin has turned a messy injury into a bigger problem. He is not just patching someone up, he is getting dragged into the private chaos that follows a public fight. In this reverse world, even healing comes with awkward rules, and everybody is acting like privacy is some optional luxury. Lin starts treatment anyway, but the moment he sees how exposed the wound is, he realizes this is less a normal checkup and more a crash course in how little modesty the local girls seem to have. He is half scandalized, half forced to stay useful, which is a terrible combination for his peace of mind. Back in the treatment room, Lin watches the healing work up close and immediately clocks that this body is recovering faster than a normal person should. That matters because it confirms the patient is no ordinary civilian, so the injury is serious even if she is trying to play it off like it is nothing. The wound finally gets wrapped up and the healer calls it done, which should have ended the night cleanly. Instead, Lin is left with the kind of headache that comes from surviving someone else's medical drama and realizing there is still more social fallout waiting outside the door. Outside the room now, the atmosphere shifts from care to attachment because the apology and bandage phase has turned into an embrace. Lin is still being pulled into Han Xinyi's orbit, and the story makes it clear that this mess is no longer about one injury. It is about who gets to stay close to him. Later that night, the conversation turns practical. Somebody offers to take him home, but the real issue is that the evening has already gone too far for anyone to pretend this stays simple. The next move is not a fight yet, it is logistics, and that usually means trouble is already lining up. Then Zhao Yutang stops joking around and turns herself into a threat with a smile. She frames Lin as prey, puts herself in the role of the hunter, and even starts talking about sending pieces of him to Zhao Yutang, which is insane in the exact way that tells Lin this is not idle flirting anymore. Back in the present hallway, Zhao Yutang makes the hunt official and gives Lin one job: run. That flips the whole dynamic, because now he is not just embarrassed or cornered, he is being actively pursued, and the chase starts with her setting the terms. Lin bolts through the city at night and starts thinking the immortal world is hopeless, which is his way of admitting the game is already bigger than his patience. The important part is simple: he is still alive, but now he has to survive a woman who treats pursuit like a hobby. At the next stop, the pressure spills back into the home front, where even a shirt becomes evidence in whatever mess is building. While one girl greets him and another shouts with excitement, the scene keeps underlining that his life is getting crowded fast, and not one bit of it is private anymore. Meanwhile, the infirmary does not feel finished at all, because somebody is still left alone there, injured and shaken, with her eye carrying the strain of everything that just happened. That small detail matters. The danger has not passed, it has only spread out and started haunting the people around Lin too. Lin gives up on the pile of rules for a second, but the mess only gets bigger because someone immediately starts using power to force the next move. Instead of letting the night turn into another argument, he pushes straight into logistics, telling the others to practice with him, because even dinner now needs a process in this house. The frustration keeps rolling because the problem is no longer food alone, it is timing, reservations, and everyone crowding into Lin's life at once. So he cuts through the noise, grabs the phone, and takes control of the arrangements himself, which is a small but important win in a world that keeps trying to schedule him like furniture. Now the call turns into a proper negotiation. Chen Letian, a man who can actually handle the details, gets dragged into the job, and even he cannot help sounding like he has been handed a headache with a phone attached. The answer is to book Zui Shang restaurant for tomorrow night, but Lin does not want a quiet meal. He wants the best, and he wants it served openly, because if people are going to stare, he may as well make them stare at quality. That demand escalates the whole thing into a challenge, because once Lin asks for the best, the Heavenly Demon Clan gets measured in public whether it likes it or not. Chen Latian accepts, and then the women around Lin start rehearsing too, because everybody in this story treats one dinner like it is a battlefield dress rehearsal. A quick flash of memory makes the stakes plain. Lin already blew one chance at a beauty contest, so this time he is not letting embarrassment run the show again. He sits with that pressure for a moment, and the joke is that his love life now needs the kind of preparation most people only give to exams or ambushes. Back on Zhao Yutang, boredom is starting to look dangerous, because when she gets restless, she stops waiting and starts acting. She checks her phone, realizes the timing is bad, and then decides that if her grandma cannot return today, she will handle the situation herself, which tells you everything about how little patience she has for standing around. That restlessness spills into the larger crowd around Lin, where everyone is already whining about demons, clan trouble, and the total lack of private time with him. Before the noise can settle, somebody stops the pair and asks where Lin is, forcing the women around him to cover for him while keeping the whole situation from exploding on the spot. Zhao Yutang keeps the pressure on from the sideline, pushing the dark-haired girl to use the lunchtime access she already has, instead of pretending the problem will solve itself. But Lin is already trying to cut off suspicion by dropping rooftop go, and Zhao Yutang treats that caution like a fool's own loose stone, something he reaches for himself and ends up tripping over. Back in the present, Zhao Yutang makes the next move, and calls in to track down the Heavenly Demon Clan, because the dinner invitation has turned into an investigation. She learns they are all in the Zuxiang Hotel, and then gets the detail that matters most. Han Xinyi and Lin have just walked in too, which means the social mess and the clan mess are colliding in the same room. At the dinner table, Lin keeps acting like this is a normal meal, but the room is already turning into a trap around him. While one woman tries to make the invitation look harmless, the people around the table are clearly one insult away from snapping, which is exactly the problem when everyone here thinks they can control the situation except Lin. The tension finally breaks when a woman lashes out and the whole table stops pretending this is polite conversation. Lin stays seated for the moment, but the message is obvious. If somebody here has enough power to turn a dinner invitation into a warning shot. Elsewhere in the hotel, Zhao Yutang arrives expecting to track Lin down and instead walks straight into a mess she does not understand. Her patience is already thinning, and when she realizes the wrong room is crawling with trouble, she sees that the social game and the hidden danger are colliding at the same time. In the hallway, Zhao Yutang keeps pushing because she wants answers, not excuses, and that stubbornness drops her into a scene she was never meant to see. She goes from suspicion to disbelief in seconds, because the room is clearly tied to something bigger than a simple dinner mix-up, and she is now standing in the middle of it. Back at the hotel entrance, Han Xinyi rushes in after hearing that Zhao Yutang and Yang Tianyu moved without permission. She expects a guarded stronghold, but the place looks deceptively ordinary, which only makes the whole situation feel worse because it means the danger is hiding behind a normal front. Inside, Han Shin-yi confronts two girls she thinks should have been helpless hostages, only to find out the situation is uglier and more complicated than that. One of the women has enough composure to mock their appearance and status, and that tells Han Shin-yi the room is packed with people who are not standing on the same side. Lin finally states his real reason for being here, and it is not dinner, flirting, or any of the other nonsense crowding the room. He is looking for proof, and the fragment in his hand becomes the thing that can expose what is really going on, which is exactly why Han Shin-yi reacts so hard when she realizes he may already have the key. The scene ends by pulling the curtain back on the next layer of power behind all this noise. The Phoenix Group's second base sits in the dark like a reminder that this conflict is bigger than one hotel dinner, and Lin is now tangled in a fight that reaches far beyond the room he walked into. Inside the confinement room, Han Shin-yi corners Zhao Yutang and makes it clear this is punishment, not a friendly chat. Zhao Yutang pushes back anyway, which tells Lin's world keeps working the same ugly way. Women with power decide who gets trapped, and everyone else is supposed to sit still and smile. Han Shin-yi then tries to smooth over the tension by appealing to Yang Tianyu's name, but the real point is simple. She does not want this mess spreading any further. She walks out and leaves the two alone, which gives Zhao Yutang exactly the opening she wanted to say what she really came for. She asks straight out if Han Shin-yi thinks she is worthy of Lin, and that question turns the room into a contest over who gets to stand closest to him. Zhao Yutang answers that question with the kind of line that tells you she is past talk and ready to remove the problem. She says she must destroy Lin, and Han Shin-yi matches that energy by promising to kill him while still taking care of him, which is a pretty normal sentence only if your life is already a disaster. The argument is no longer about feelings, because both sides are now talking about Lin like he is the prize and the target at the same time. Before that ugly rivalry can boil over, Zhao Yutang cuts in and stops the room from spinning any further. She makes a call, and the panic in her voice turns the situation from a private clash into an active warning that Lin is in immediate danger. That matters because once someone starts screaming for help, this stops being gossip and becomes a hunt. Elsewhere, Lin's allies catch the same alarm and finally understand that he needs rescuing now, not later. The warning is blunt enough to override whatever else they were doing, because whoever is coming for Lin is already moving with lethal intent. The story shifts from social pressure to survival pressure in a heartbeat. Back with the threat itself, the attacker makes the point plain by going straight for Lin's life and not bothering with small talk. Lin barely gets out of the way, and the near miss tells him the enemy is stronger than he expected, with an aura bad enough to feel wrong even by cultivation standards. He survives, but only just, which means the trap around him is now openly lethal. After that hit, the crushing pressure finally starts to ease, and Lin realizes he is not dead yet, which counts as a win in this mess. He escapes by a margin so thin he can hardly believe it, and that escape proves how absurdly bad the situation was. If he had to treat simply getting away as a miracle. The danger is not gone though, because surviving one strike only means the person hunting him is still out there. Back in the aftermath, Lin finds a tired purple-haired woman and offers her water, which should be a simple mercy if his life were ever simple. She accepts it, but the moment immediately goes sideways when something in front of him changes hard enough to catch his eye. That is the last thing he needs, because even the quietest beat in his life seems to come with a hidden hook. Lin presses closer and mocks the purple-haired woman for wetting herself, then uses the bottle like he is done playing nice. He leans in and drops the cruelest line of the whole stretch, saying Yang Tianxi will need to bear a second child, which lands like a knife because it turns family pressure, humiliation, and fertility into one filthy threat. At this point, the story is not just about Lin surviving women who want to control him, but about him answering that pressure with a kind of menace that makes the room itself feel unsafe.